For more music, check out our Spotify and YouTube playlists. Enjoy.
Hello everyone and welcome to a podcast of sorts that we'll be talking about all three current Paragon remakes. I'm Bloodmortius and joined here with me is Array.
How you doing?
Felix. I called you
Hello.
Felix. Undeadpilot.
Hello.
And Import.
Hello.
Cool.
The production quality is through the roof right now.
It is fantastic. So we're just going to basically be chatting over all three of the Paragon remakes, what we like, what we don't like, and how we feel about them and such, and then just give our sort of five opinions on them thus far. So we're going to be opening up with Fault to start, so I've got some Fault footage on screen. There'll be some Overprime and Predecessor coming up as well, and it'll just loop through, so enjoy that while we have our chat. But yeah, if you guys have any questions and stuff, there'll be time for that at the end. Otherwise, we'll be hopping right into Fault and talking about some things we actually quite like about it. So who wants to start?
I guess I will. Honestly, the items are pretty good in terms of like the actual value for their cost and all this stuff. I think the stats are kind of, for the most part, placed in the right place. There are some exceptions, but it's a pretty decent item system overall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the
another
items
point
are
is,
very nice.
I think they did the kits pretty well. The passive kits, like they get rid of them, right? They have one passive on every hero and then 4 active abilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like
all
with
that's
the
well
Kwang.
done. I like the Kwang especially. The Bellica, I mean, it's fine. It's not too many changes, but other also the Greystone change is very good. Like the disarm, I like that a lot.
Mm-hmm. Anything
Are
else?
there any others? I don't even know.
I mean, personally, I really like the support itemization. I like the options you have for actives and passives, and sort of gold costs allocated to them. I think they're done really well in the white tree.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't believe this Jinx is getting paid by Fault, and that's all he has to say, man. Like, they're gonna ask for a refund, man.
What? I'm not getting paid. What?
Are you sure? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
No,
Not
I
yet, not
think
yet.
Murdoch also has like no passives anymore, which is a big plus, right? So.
Yeah, actually, that is a good point. I really like Murdoch on this version. It's probably like the best out of the three for Murdoch in particular.
Yes.
I really like his kit. Like, it just feels nice to use.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of objectives, I think Prime is in a pretty good spot. Fangtooth is like discussable. I think it's not bad. It just really comes down to what this division from Strange Matter Studios with this objective, but it's not like it doesn't feel like it doesn't have any impact.
Yeah, no, I agree. I really like the orb, and I like the idea behind the Raptors, even if, as we're going to go into it, I don't think it works overall. But the idea that it does fit into as a scaling objective is quite important. So at least there's priority on them, and people actually group for them, I think is a good thing. Unlike, for example, the old Fangtooth from OP with the shield, just not valuable at all. Cool. Anything else anyone wants to mention about things they like about Fault, things they've enjoyed over the past?
The auto attacks are actually well done, in my opinion.
Yeah?
Just the auto attacks, yeah.
ADCs, yeah, I did quite like ranged.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to see projectile-based autos come back, right? Like, that's something I've missed. I've always hated hit
Yep.
scan. I've always hated hit scan.
Yeah.
Fuck you
Yep.
CSGO players, man. Like, just get out. But realistically, it's like you said, it's got like a nice economy, right? There's no ambient gold if you miss the last hit, so last hitting is actually important, which in theory means more of an interesting lane phase, but sadly it hasn't quite worked out that way. But like you said, the character redesigns, implementation of champion passives, which makes the kits more unique and have more of an identity of what you're doing. The item shop is a bit scuffed, but the idea is there, right? You know, we can talk about the affinity system and the favor and all that, but realistically, there's some interesting passives, a couple of actives, support itemization is pretty good. You know, you've got decent neutral objectives on the map. There are buffs and things like this, and again, all of this needs work, but for the most part, the idea is right. You know, it's a good step in the right direction. So I can't have any complaints, and of course, it is a work in progress, right? But you know, we will come to the idea that there are issues as well, and it's not devoid of criticism. I can praise it in many ways, but there's also a lot of things we want to see as well moving forward.
I also want to give props to their social media team. I think they've done a really good job. I feel like everybody who wants to know about Fall knows about Fall just because they keep on posting. They keep on like these screenshots with explaining heroes and all that stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I've always enjoyed the people coming forward to me when I was streaming Fault, like asking me, "Hey, do you like the game? Have any feedback?" Yeah, I think that they're really they're hustling over there.
Yeah. I think the big takeaway is just the fact that it is probably, it still has flaws, obviously, right? But it's like the most developed item system out of the three, is really the big takeaway. And like it's, at least the items feel, they feel better than the other ones. Yes, it has issues, but it feels better.
I completely agree.
Way more intuitive than the other ones.
Yeah, I would say so.
The only thing I would ask is, you know, if they want me to do placeholder icons, I've got pretty nasty paint skills, so I can just whack them in, man. It'll make it a lot more readable, you know. Just saying.
Yeah, it is rough times if you're not used to the names and all this with all the same icons, I guess.
It's quite overwhelming, yeah. And obviously it will change, right, given time and everything like that. But as it stands right now, I'm sat there trying to read through it, man, and I'm not an intelligent man on the best of days, so.
A little bit of liquor can solve any problem, right?
Oh yeah. What do you think I'm doing right now, man?
Exactly, brother.
Cool. So in terms of like all the positive stuff, yeah, we're pretty happy with a lot of aspects of the game. But in terms of maybe feedback, in terms of issues of the game, who wants to open with a point about that?
Guess I'll take it.
Sure.
Yeah, there are a few characters that it just feel like so much worse to not only play but to play against. Like I was playing a couple games earlier today, and honestly, playing against Belica is pretty obscene. Sometimes I just don't know what's going on. Like I just don't know what I'm dying to. Things like that. It's like the audio cues sometimes. The audio's fine. Like you'll hear like the Belica R&B drop, right? But especially with the drone, even though it only lasts 4 seconds, it's just not intuitive. There's no big circle on the ground. There's no sound. Like sometimes you just die to it because it does a fuck ton of damage, right? But you just don't know what's going on.
It seems to disappear, yeah, the Belica drone. I don't know. You place it and it randomly disappears. You don't know what's going on, yeah. It's just confusing to play against Belica. I can see that, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the biggest thing, is sometimes it's like it's not the most, in terms of clarity, I think it isn't the greatest right now. That's really like the biggest thing.
Yeah, for
I just
sure.
I wish I knew what I was dying to. That way it's like, oh, it's like this is how much damage like the drone's doing late game and like all this stuff. I can't even get a feel for it because I just don't know what I'm dying to.
And it's not just when you're dying over, it's just clarity in general, where when TB's ulting and stuff, when TB's using his R&B, you know, it's like all these elements in terms of VFX, SFX all have a lot of issues like, across most of the characters and item effects too. Like, where did that big shield come from? And it's obviously because the guy's used his AoE shield item, the BOTD item. It's you don't see where these things come from initially, and that can make things awkward to play around.
And a small, really quality of life thing. This is something that credit to Ray for this because you mentioned it yesterday, but I just remember it looking at the footage. Is that it kind of bothers me that you can't just press tab and then hover over somebody's item and like see what it does. You have to actually go into the shop. It's like a really small like QOL thing, right? But it's like I feel like you see that in like every other game as well, where it's like if I haven't played support and I don't know what like X white item is, there isn't any item art to like really make it intuitive. But you also can't just go look at the item without having to like go through different steps. It's like a really small QOL thing, but it did actually bug me.
I mean, this is the hard thing about this is that all of these things are subject to change. It all will get changed, and that's all well and dandy and great. And shout outs to Reverb in the chat, by the way. Me and him have a secret relationship going on that nobody knows about. But
Nice.
anyways, oh, he's hot as fuck. You have no idea. But no, like when you look at things like the feedback, the small issues with the item system and, hitting tab and all of these different things, it's so easy to say, well, it's in an alpha, it's going to get better, it's fine. But the reality is that this is what you've come to the market with. This is what people are expecting. You've built up all of this hype. And like what you said, Shinx, like the community outreach has been great. The marketing's top tier. Is why they're doing so well comparatively, right? But you've opened yourself up to a complete crazy amount of criticism when you come day one with that level of hype, and suddenly you've got all of these issues going into release. And I don't want to say it's not a good look, but like it's not, and this is why you can see so much backlash coming out.
Yeah, like you don't want to bash on all the bugs, but there is some pretty game-breaking stuff that you wonder why is this not being tested? Like just to name a few, like people sometimes appear randomly. You don't connect into games, and then if you have to reconnect, you can't choose any factions. Another one is Gideon. If he gets stunned while he's using his RMB, he just can't do any abilities anymore for the rest of the match. It's like a lot of game-breaking stuff, and it makes you wonder. Like I don't know, like sort it out, please. If you wanna people to if you wanna charge people, right?
I mean, same with the Bellica RMB going upstairs, TB grenades going upstairs, like you can't get them on high ground, and it makes it really awkward to use, especially in mid lane, for example. It's another one of those things that you would have thought would just be fixed before.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I should just weigh in on the early access thing, because I think that's what rubs a lot of people the wrong way, right? And obviously, you've got all the history of early access, games that haven't delivered, etc., right? So it's already kind of got a weird atmosphere about it anytime you see a game in early access. But, don't forget, there's games like Rust. Even Minecraft, once upon a time, was fucking early access, effectively, right? There's a lot of successful games that come out of it, and I've got no doubt that Strange Matter Studios are completely fine, above board, legit. They mean what they say, and you can see it based in the turnaround and what they're trying to do, right? But once you start charging people have a certain level of expectation, and that's where a lot of the kind of the backlash comes from, right? It's like, well, you've charged me for this, and I've gone into it willingly. Sure, great, that's fine. And yes, it is a work in progress, and you should understand and respect these things, but it's kind of your one shot when you release and you're like, right, guys, this is what we've been working on for the past 7 months. We had to delay back in May, but that 2 extra months, here's what we've got to show for it. And when you release with a game riddled with bugs, a lot of shortcomings, whether that be, like there's a new HUD coming out in 2 weeks, right? But obviously people's first impression is going to be the way the HUD is right now, how it looks visually, feedback issues, a lot of things that haven't really iterated on too much since the alpha test back in December. It's just not something that really screams to people like, right, Fault's the big one, is going to nail it, this is the game I'm going to play, and this is the Paragon success we've all wanted and been waiting for, right? It's still got a lot of time to go. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with that. But as soon as you get into the territory of opening the door to charging people, microtransactions, people start to expect more. And I think that's why the vitriol is quite as strong as it is.
I mean, realistically, it's just the fact that you're going to be compared to your competitors at the end of the day, right? And
Exactly.
it's the only one that is being charged. And when you look at it, yes, predecessor doesn't have things, right? It doesn't have the same amount of content in terms of false item system is a million times better. It also has more heroes, and you can talk about like actually having passives and all this other content, right? But when you look at the skeleton of what predecessor has, as opposed to the skeleton that Vault has, right? It's like it does leave much to be desired. Is kind of the point, and one's being charged, and what is it?
I mean, it all goes under the argument it's early access, right? And shouldn't expect much. It's early access, blah blah blah. But I don't think you should push towards the bottom of early access. I think you should push to the top. Like you want to have as much quality as possible, right? Obviously, it's still gonna be early access, and I get that. But I don't feel like you should be pushing to the bottom of that and just like have all these bugs, and then just like whenever people ask and they criticize you for it, they hold you accountable for it, you say, well, it's early access, guys.
I mean, that is the benefit of the model, right? Is that you get community interaction, you get direct feedback, you can help develop the game as it's working in, plus you can help finance it, support it, whether that be server costs or, trying to bankroll some of these things or outsourcing things like the HUD. Fuck knows how much that costs, right? But these are all things they can do as a result of early access and other sources of funding, and that's great. But it's a case of when you market yourself in a specific way, people will judge you on the merits of what they've got there in that moment. and asking for patience and just people to be, you know, respect, interact. You know, it takes time. All of these things, it's all well and great, but you've got a product and you've got to show it strong on day one. And I think that's something where Fault has had a few issues, right? And don't get me wrong, I feel bad for the server issues that happened completely out of their control, and people need to realize the server issues
Also,
weren't
the
their
key
fault.
issues apparently were out of their control as well. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's bad. It has a bad impression to people, yeah. But
Yeah.
it's not your fault, right?
It's very unfortunate, but then at the same time, a lot of the criticism is not just because, oh, servers weren't available day one or anything like that. There was rather some really game-breaking bugs day one, and you kind of look at it, and as a layman from the outside perspective, you think, why the fuck is this still in the game on day one? Like, did you guys not test this? Even if it's a new build, like, you know, where's the QA here? And that's how people read it, whether they like it or not, you know?
Yeah, I completely agree. But yeah, it's also just the comparison with the other two remakes, you know, where they've all got their issues and stuff, but it's like it's said when you got the paid model, and then you come in with certain issues that the other ones don't have. You know, it's like what have they been doing the whole time, especially with delays and everything, and all this. So yeah, it does, as I said, leave a lot to be desired when it comes to Fault. As I said, like when it first came along and I played a bunch of games of it, even after like 40, 50 games or whatever, it's disappointing in a sense because there is a lot of good stuff there. And then you sort of expect a little bit more when it's coming out, especially with all the sort of hype and everything sort of built around it. Not that I haven't enjoyed most of my time with it, but again, there's a lot of frustrating things there, whether, you know, it is with just the feedback and feeling of the gameplay, whether it's Narbash Funk hitting you because the minion's like not hitting a target because the minion's right behind you and it hits the minion instead, because the ability's coming from the camera or whatever instead of the character, and whether it was like the balance of the game initially, or you said the big bugs with Gideon and such, it makes the game a lot less satisfying to play in that regard.
So what's your big take in terms of immediate issues that you want to see changed as soon as possible that would be beneficial for the game moving on? Not necessarily bugs, but like what is it you'd want to see changed moving forward?
For me personally, it's probably more towards the actual sort of feeling of the gameplay and ability read and all that, so whether it's sound effects, visual effects, all these things, so I can actually know what's actually going on in a fight, right, and all the feedback when you're actually playing the game. So when I'm playing against a TB, you know, and he's running me down, you know, I can actually hear his auto attacks going off and such, you know, you can actually move side to side and juke stuff and use abilities to play around it, whether it's timing of Muriel shields or whatever. It's all super important when it comes to the small things in your gameplay. So the main thing is just sort of the feedback of combat and everything. Yeah, that's the main thing.
I mean, that's the big thing, yeah. Like, the couple of games I played Vault, it felt really, well, so to say, boring in lane, because it just feels slow, and I haven't gotten into, like, late game shit, because the game's ended up in a surrender, so I don't know how it feels past that. But the in-lane combat, the last hitting, it feels quite slow compared to the other games.
Especially in early game because of the boot system, and when you don't have boots, you move so slow. But especially from us coming from Overprime, where you have travel mode, right? Obviously the contrast is very big, but it does feel slow in the early game. I mean,
yeah, but even without the travel mode, it's the combat feels way better.
In Over, it's more fast paced.
Yeah,
I agree on that.
Also more responsive in it is the clarity, right? Like with auto attacks, with ability casts, like you know what's going to happen as it's happening, right? Instead of, you know, not actually understanding fully what's going on within a fight due to, again, lack of sound effects, lack of visual effects. So yeah, that's probably my main point on it.
I mean, when it comes to the other two, two more points are very important to fix immediately. It's like obviously performance, and then the other stuff is game breaking bugs, right? I feel like you have to have that sorted out. And I think they have the priority straight when it comes to that. Like they said they were gonna fix the FPS, and they said they want to fix the
it's supposed to
the
be fixed with this
and
patch
stuff.
The
right?
like the FPS and stuff is supposed to be fixed this patch. I just posted in here so you can just look at it. But like it looks like FPS and the reconnection issues and like stuff like that haven't fixed, and also settings getting changed. That's like
Yeah.
for the most part.
Which is good, and it's one thing we need to take into account as well, just in terms of like the turnaround on all the stuff. Like, for example, Fault, just, you know, day one kind of thing, fixed all the jungle bugs, which was super frustrating the first game I played and such. It's like they're actually fixing a lot of stuff real quick, and, you know, putting out all this stuff really quick. And you got to look at like Predecessor, you know, took a week to get all sort of their stuff together, and then Overprime can have like these big sort of areas of time where just not much is happening and not much is being fixed because they're working on bigger things or different things, and maybe the priorities aren't there. So yeah, you've got to look at sort of the progress each is making as well, day to day, week to week.
Mm-hmm.
We could move on to another point, like maybe talk about the jungle.
Yeah,
Uh,
False Jungle.
yeah, that works.
So, I mean, my first experience in jungle was that, you know, I was sort of run around, see what's going on. And the white camps, I think, are one thing that will absolutely have to go at some point. I think the model of a white camp in general is absolutely atrocious, always has been since Paragon. You basically don't get any value from it until it's actually properly stacked up in value of XP or gold. So it just de-incentivizes you to farm them at that point, unless you want to prevent invades and stuff, but that's really boring. You end up just doing buffs and ganking and waiting for these camps to stack up and protecting them until they are. And then you end up sort of like big clearing them. And in general, again, it leaves you on less of these sort of rotations where you got to think about, you know, when my camp's actually going to respawn and the pathing around that. It just makes it a lot, you know, less satisfying when you're clearing jungle, a little more sort of monotonous, which I don't like. I think it's very unenjoyable in that regard. And I also think the gank routes from jungle are also really sort of meh unless you've actually got a leap to leap into under towers and stuff. Although I guess we'll get into tower diving in a bit. But yeah, you guys will play jungle as well. What do you think about it?
That's a hard one, man.
You want to take it?
You go ahead, and I'll add on.
So it's like you said about the white camps. It's not even like I'm not as fed up with like the white camp theme as you are. Yes, it'd be ideal if we could have our own individual camps with all different values, different clearing, etc. But it's like I'm fine with it being the way it is because it's just easier, right? And I try and take that into account. That's just easier to develop and move on. They can always change these things later. But
I mean, yeah,
is
really
it
quickly,
ideal?
as far as I'm aware, like, yeah, there is going to be some sort of an overhaul or a revamp. I don't know what form that's going to take, but again, I'm sure they're aware, and it's something that's on the back burner, right? Like, whether that happens from a month now or 3, I don't fucking know, man. But I think it will be changed at some point.
Yeah, because I don't mind. I mean, we played with it in Paragon and Overprime, and like, yeah, it sucks. Yeah, it's stupid, but it is what it is, right? It's mostly just like, I wish the camps. It's like the time to kill for the camps almost. Just don't. The investment for time in or kill the camps just doesn't seem to correlate with like what you get from them. That's the only way I can really say with it. I'm talking about the white camps, not the buffs.
Yeah. The white.
It's just like, they either need to be easier to kill or they need to give more. It's like there needs to be like something. Like, I'm sure that there's some kind of middle ground. I don't really have a proposed solution of like, oh, just adjust this value and all this, but I feel like something's wrong almost with the math, because the jungle plays in a very weird way, which is not that it's not impactful, because it's a very impactful role. But just sometimes, man, like in certain instances, it's not fun to play when like you don't have like this, when you don't have the red buff, you don't have a buff to play around, you don't have like a lane to go to and things like that. It's like you're clearing these white camps, and clearing is incredibly monotonous, and you get absolutely nothing for it, and it takes forever to clear them. So it's just I don't know how else to say it. It's like this. It's kind of a feel thing, but it's also just it just doesn't feel good nor kill these camps, and it also isn't incredibly rewarding. So it's like I can't path with you can path with 5 stacks in mind, but it's just I don't know. It's just the white camps, man.
It's what we noticed, right? If you jungle and you start your buffs, you feel like you have to pressure something, you have to get something, while you have these buff times up on you, and then also like if you don't, you start to fall behind, or like not really fall behind, but you're not gonna get ahead, and you're actually gonna hit 6 by the time your dual lane hits 6, which is kind of late, honestly. It's usually not a MOBA, it's a lot quicker, and it just makes it feel if you don't get shit done on the map or even fall behind, jungle really falls apart, and then it's just like stupid white minion bashing to try to catch up, but you can't really because they don't stack up fast enough, or like you don't clear them fast enough. Just a bunch of issues when it comes to that. Yeah.
The big problem I have, a lot of it comes down to values, but you can't even fix it by just rearranging the XP and the gold you get from a camp, because they're on a cycle, and you know, as far as I'm aware, it's about a minute, give or take. I'm not entirely sure, right? But about a minute for another white minion to spawn in on its camp. So realistically, when you kill this camp at the end, where you're getting about 45 gold ish for each minion, you're getting about 200 gold from a camp. XP wise, I think it's about 16 per minion, which realistically comes out at about 2 milli minions and a caster minion. It's really not a lot of XP you get, but you're waiting 5 minutes for this camp to build up. And God forbid somebody randomly just walks in and messes with the timing whenever you want to do it. If they've got free time in mid, they come in, they kill a couple of creeps. It's not like you can play around, okay, I run around the map, I wait for my 5 stack to come up, then I get a big payoff from it. It's too much downtime. So realistically, the way it looks like it plays right now is you kill your buffs because the buff is effectively worth a kill, if not more, depending on the duration of the game and how far along the gold scaling has gone and, different XP values and all this sort of thing. But realistically, why wouldn't you just run between lanes and look for kills? There's comeback XP within the kills as well, or at least that's how it seems. So run between camps, get your buffs, look for kills, constantly permagank. There's nothing else to farm in the downtime, and that's a big issue where you've got so much time you have to wait before the camp is fully where it needs to be. It just doesn't feel like a rewarding way to play jungle, And it's not to say it's not an impactful role, because it really is. It's one of the only things that really breaks up the game, actually. But when everything's consolidated to the red and the blue buff, it doesn't feel great, man.
It's not even like red and blue don't feel impactful, but they're like the only things that feel impactful is like the real like message to send, right?
And there's 5 minutes downtime between each one, of course, right?
Yeah, of course. That's really what it is. Like there is a middle ground to find it. It's like, would you say the red and blue are actually in a good spot? I'm actually curious about that because I didn't really think about it until now.
I think blue is.
Yeah, I think the buffs, both of them are actually okay, like themselves, in what they do.
Because red buff just got nerfed. I think it got nerfed to like, what was it, 10% or 50? It got nerfed by 5, I'm pretty sure.
It was 15 down to 10, I believe, right?
Speaking as a mid laner, if that motherfucker has a fucking red buff on level 2, I'm not stepping up in lane. There's no point. There's just no point. I'm gonna die. That's what I'm gonna say to red buff, right? They are impactful for sure. I thought blue buff was always, no, it's fine. You just get mana regen. Does it even give CDR? I don't know, but it just feels fine, right? And then red buff feels really powerful, obviously.
I mean, the upside is that there's clearly gaping issues, right? But where they want to go with it from here is quite open to whatever they want to do. They don't have to go the League traditional red and blue buff. They can go more Smite-esque. They can add less significant buffs in different areas and stuff like that. Or they can take the League approach and diversify the camps and pump a bit more XP and gold into them. Because right now, jungle is effectively, unless you start fragging a lot and getting a lot of kills, you are a second support in terms of the way XP plays out. It's really hard to even keep up with a solo lane. You're generally on par with a duo lane. And when you factor in how big the map is and base move speed, and before you even have boots, you feel really just massively constrained about what you want to do and where you're going. But, this is completely open to whatever they want to do with it, they can do with it. If they want to add things like a speed buff, they can do that. Have the game be more based around buffs and playing for these timings. It's up to them, really, and I don't know which direction they're going to go, but no matter what happens, I want to see the rotation of having these 5 stacking white camps. I want to see it removed because I just think it's detrimental to timing. When it comes to invade timings, when it comes to your pathing, you've got less interesting choices. And even in terms of specialization of, well, my character's really good at killing a single target, so I can clear in this specific way. I can ignore the AoE camp, You've got all these different kind of gameplay options that open up if you really look to change things up. Yeah.
And I completely agree. And that's also, like, in terms of leaning on from that, in terms of gank routes and such, I find that the so mid lane is ridiculously open, right? That you got like 6 areas to come from. It's so easy to gank and come from, and it's it's so punishable, especially for characters like Countess. It makes them really weak, and it makes characters like Gideon way
even Gideon,
stronger.
but that tells you it's kind of rough, right? Even if Gideon is not safe.
Exactly, even with his TP. And then when it comes to side lanes, for example, it's much harder. It's so easy to get vision on them, especially with a duo lane, right? Who's got 2 people using their trinket wards and support with a ward item. It's super hard to ever be able to gank that lane without sentries. Mainly due to the fact that it is just that one fat wall that you've got to go through, essentially. It's absolutely huge, and it's really easy just to put 2 wards and it's completely covered. And all you can do is sit there, basically, and wait. Otherwise, and the only other option is go all the way through around in their jungle, and then come in this awkward pathing. It's almost like you need a way to separate a couple entrances in that middle bit, rather than have one big wall having 2 entrances that are split. And then potentially even having ways for sort of high ground entrance, right, to sort of emphasize junglers that can use mobility and go up onto high ground and stuff, which I don't think even technically exists yet, right? When you have Boris, when you have Chimera, when you have like only Greystone, right? If you jungled him, would probably really be able to do it and have a good gank route. Which is also something to keep in mind when you do get junglers in future and you want to balance them around mobility, right? Where do you want to sort of play around in terms of high ground? There isn't really.
Speaking of high ground, so in terms of verticality in this game, you know, different people favor different amounts and all this kind of thing. But, you know, end of the day, Paragon, 3D MOBA, right? What's the benefit of having a 3D MOBA? You've got the vertical dimension to play with a lot more. So, like, how do you feel about it in terms of fault? Obviously, we'll talk about it with Predecessor and Overprime coming up later. But, you know, first impressions.
I mean, it's like Blood already mentioned. It's Greystone has it, I guess. Like a couple people have it, a couple of heroes have it, but is it very impactful? There's some cheesy stuff you can do it, but there's no. Yeah, you don't really feel it usually. Like there's like some little things, like when you walk up to the blue buff, like you have these high ground, these little stairs, which I think is cool.
Yeah,
they play around with it a little bit.
There's a couple areas you can jump over in the map as well, like walls.
Yeah.
So they use the wall element well. It's just the actual high ground itself is only really utilized sort of around towers more than anything in defense and such like that. Otherwise, I see very little use in the high ground, which doesn't matter at the moment because you don't have the characters that abuse it as much. But when you start getting characters like Aurora and such, you know, you want characters to play around high ground, building walls and stuff and jumping up high. I think you need elements like that to make it a bit more interesting, you know. Oh yeah, and Raptor Pit, which point you've got that little high ground there, which a ranged character can play around, though. We haven't seen much use of it, but yeah.
In terms of all three games, this one probably, I would say it definitely has the least amount of verticality implemented, right? Or am I wrong?
No,
Have
Predecessor.
you played Pred?
Yeah,
Fuck
yeah.
me, man.
Predecessor's
never
way
mind.
worse in that regard. Yeah.
Feels like I'm in a desert, man. It's that flat, like.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
That's
only
fair.
like verticality in Pred have is like, I guess mid lane where you drop into river buffs and
That's,
into the
the
prime
mid lane
pit.
cliff, and then base inhibs, like the
Yeah,
bits between. But
it's
their
not that
jungle
much, so-
is just a flat plane.
So I do appreciate these little stairs they have on blue buff, for example.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
they're cool. Yeah, I think if you want to invade,
They're
you,
good.
you walk up there and then you have like a high ground you can play around. It's nice, yeah. So they have the idea about it. It's just probably more of a hero issue right now, right? Like it's just you don't have the heroes to actually abuse these verticalities.
Yeah, as I said, when you got more characters and stuff, then maybe they come a
Exactly,
little
yeah.
more into play and you can look at them better. So yeah, like I said, it hasn't troubled me much in jungle in that regard, the high ground access, because the only one to use is Greystone and maybe Steel Ult if you're jumping over a wall like we saw Tang do, you know, on a tier 1. You had a creative gank route with that because you can jump over that wall. There's ways you can use it that
Shout
way. So
out to
we probably
Tang.
we just need more characters that can do stuff like that to then probably better rate it, I guess. In terms of
Did we
playing with
move
high
on?
ground.
Next point.
Let's talk about towers, man. I love towers.
Towers, yeah, that's a good one. That follows on nicely. So, I mean, we already know that diving towers is an absolutely horrible task in this game due to the fact that, like, multiple times when I've been TB, you know, we've gone for a tower dive, my tank tanks it, he takes 3 shots, then he drops aggro, and I take, like, 2, and that's it, I'm dead instantly, just because I managed to take aggro and weaving in autos and stuff. So I've had a pretty horrible time with it due to how much instant damage they seem to do, and their ramping, I don't think is that strong, but I think the base just seems ridiculously powerful, right?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's I think with towers, it's just like people feel subjectively different about it. It's just some people want them to be stronger. They want to have like this little safe spot, and then other people want to do these hard to execute tower dives with
Yes.
juggling the aggro. I guess mostly competitively, but also other players like they want to have the option to abuse certain time windows when you know.
Yeah.
And it's not like, oh wait, he's on the tower, I can't do anything. And it really does feel like it is really punishing in the early game especially.
Yeah,
And then
yeah, for
also
sure.
through mid game, honestly, it's I mean, you just die.
It's weird because it is almost like, not that they don't scale, but like ramping is really weird, but the base is super high. That's what it feels
It
like.
is,
Because
yeah.
I remember the one game, Felix, when you were playing Kwang, and when you had so much armor, it was just dumb, right? Like it didn't matter at that point. It's just like
That was
oh, no,
late
I-
game and that was fed. Yeah.
I do feel like
It
the
can get to
base-
a point where towers, yeah. So probably ramping higher, base damage lower is like the
It
message
might
I'm
also be the
getting, right?
pen, like, you know, most mobile league and such do like a 33% armor
Yeah.
pen, right, to make them stronger later and weaker earlier in terms of actual damage output.
Good.
It's very
The
important.
point is that it's incredibly polarizing. Where it's like in late game, well, whenever you are at a certain point, like towers don't mean anything, but then in early game, it's almost like they're, I don't know.
Like, also you don't ever go for an early tower push. They're too tanky. You
Mhm.
just can't. It feels like, right?
I
At
mean,
least
this-
I never see myself hitting the mid tower ever. Like, there's no point.
I'm okay with that for now, just due to the fact that, again, you don't have anything like tower plating in this game like League, where so you can extend the laning phase with tankier towers to about 12 minutes. I don't mind if the T1s are a bit tankier, just for the purpose of, extending that laning phase, because it's an interesting thing to have, right, an extended laning.
It's to chime in a little bit. I think it's a little bit hard for like these tower pushes to really be a viable option whenever minions are kind of almost in the state that they're in. I know it's like another point,
Sure.
but I just want to add on to it where it's like I wouldn't even like know where to start on the minions. I don't want to like go there, right? But it's just I think the minions have a lot to do with it, is what I'm trying to say. Like whenever you're trying to put these big waves in, like how much damage they do, and like all the values. Like I don't know.
Yeah, it's very hard to know without knowing exactly, you know, what the minion scaling is, what the tower scaling is. Do towers have pen? Do they not? You know, without even being able to read it, I can only go off a feel, right? The issue I've got is that one, towers, you know, they did recently nerf the base health on towers, which is great. Like they are less tanky to kill, it's a lot easier to raise them, especially on a bad recall. But the reality is that when it comes to lane interactions, there's not really much to do. And a part of that is because as much as you might want to shove and crash a wave, and then, okay, you have the last hit under tower, and if you miss the last hit, you miss the gold, which is great, right? But the reward is just, payoff isn't really there. And the reason being is that you can't build up a big wave, crash it under, bring your jungler over, and dive to two people there, like 3v2. Somebody's going to die in that situation. If you tank 3, maybe 4 shots, you just instantly get vaporized.
Yep.
And to me, it really restricts the amount of options you have in terms of strategy. Where if I'm playing the game right now, all I'm going to look to do in duo lane is freeze the lane. I'm going to freeze the lane. I'm going to deny you XP. If you run up, I will try and run you down, and that's it. Because why would I ever try and crash a wave and give you XP for free when I can't even dive you? And the reason I can't dive you is that towers hit super hard. Now, like late game, they're not as much of an issue once you get some armor and everything else. That's fine. It's not a problem there. But it's within those first 15, 20 minutes, you know.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you should be able to walk in and take 6 tower hits free. Of course not. But I'd like to see a little bit more ease to actually make plays under the tower and to try and deny and monopolize on having a good wave state and all of these different things. But right now, if I look to dive somebody, 3 hits, I'm dead.
Yeah.
And it's not worth the trade-off. It's too risky. And because it's too risky, it's going to feed into passive play, right? And then, I mean, like Reverb said, obviously coming from
Freezing,
Overprime, where
yeah.
towers... Yeah, like coming from Overprime, like towers are obviously a lot less impactful, right? You can tank the towers a lot easier. I don't think they're as terrible as people make them out to be, but, you know,
Agreed.
they're a lot easier to tank, right? But at least the benefit of that is it encourages aggressive play. It encourages fast play, as opposed to sitting back and just hugging your tower and just trying to hold the wave in front of your tower. Then nobody can ever touch you. They can't do anything. And if you can't CC somebody out the front of their tower, you're never going to kill them. You can't run them down.
Mhm.
You can't juggle aggro, like nothing. It's the passivity that really bugs me, right? And it reduces your options.
I completely agree. I think they, in terms of a solution, just in terms of what Reverb said, I would lower the base damage per se, but you can make the ramping stronger, so if you do tank it for sustained periods, that's better. You can give it armor pen, like percent pen, so that it's better late game against the tankier targets, and
Yep.
you know, with the base lower, it's still going to equivalent to the same damage later on. It just makes it so when you can take just a couple more tower shots early, especially if someone like maybe a Boris who's tankier, maybe built one basic armor card, it just means that you can perform these tower dives and punish people that you can, again, crash those big waves against you. So you form your freeze, you build up your big wave as you're freezing and such, and start slow pushing it towards them. This is when sometimes you can recall, but you know, you want more options, right? You want to give them the option that maybe we can dive this guy, kill him, and stop him getting all this golden XP, which we're shoving under now, if we rotate our jungler over. But then it needs to actually, you know, be an option at that point. And most of the characters, it does come down partially to the characters, right? In League, you have, like, you know, Lee Sin with his dashes, he dashes in, dashes out. You got Elise, you can drop aggro and stuff, so you got all these characters that have mechanics around turrets, which we don't really have here, right? You've got Boris who runs under, and he's going to auto, and then he's got, like, no dashes to get out, really. His R&B is super short range.
You have a lot
and
of
feels
one-way
bit
tickets in.
clunky.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Kwang Tether, you know, he tethers, goes in, doesn't really get out. Several, if
Yeah,
he
I
has to
think-
dash in, he can't get out.
I think Kwong's a good example where I haven't played a ton of solo lane, but one of the issues with solo lane is it feels very passive and just quite bland, right? And don't get me wrong, this is a problem across like a bunch of MOBAs. It's the whole wet noodle fight meme and all this kind of thing, right? But if
HP
I'm
regen.
like HP regen, love it. You know, never forget spiking, right? But the issue is that if I chunk somebody out, it's like a level 7 trade timing. They're 50% under tower. I'm playing Kwong. I hit my full combo on them. I go in, like you said, it's a Hail Mary play where I can kill this guy with, let's say I burst them and then I've got to order them 2 more times. But at that point, after 3, maybe 4 tower hits, chances are I'm dead, right?
Yep.
And the playbook shouldn't be, I'm going to trade my life for this guy so he misses the entire minion wave. There should be more options in terms of getting in, getting out, or just having more ability to tank this tower and not feel like attacking somebody under tower is suicide, because frankly, that's how it feels right now.
Yeah, completely agree.
And it's not to say it should be the other way, and towers don't mean anything, but factor in as well, the big base towers, you can kite around them really easy, you can block auto, skill shots, you name it, right? It just makes it way more difficult than it needs to be. And then defender's advantage becomes a really big problem. And when defender's advantage is really strong, and what I mean by that is if you're on the defensive side, and you've got somebody coming into you, if that becomes too strong, it makes the game quite passive and quite stagnant. And it feels frustrating because even if you're ahead, you feel like you should be able to do something, but if there's not a neutral objective to fight around, they've got no incentive to come out to you, right? And it just becomes a problem.
Yeah, it's just a little bit too far. It's not a huge issue, but it does stagnate the laning phase. As we said, it makes it more passive, just as one less option.
And I mean, when you factor in with the different systems as well, with like the way jungle camps are, and because let's say you crash a tower in solo lane, and then maybe you go to look to take a camp away, right? That's great. Right now, with the way the camps are, it's not really worth your time. You're better off just getting a better recall timing or something like this. So when you start changing these systems together, the way they interact and play out, it will help. Towers, I know we're harping on about it, but it's not really that hard of a fix, right? But just getting it to that sweet point. But I think it's a really important point that needs to really be pushed, that you shouldn't encourage passive play, especially in like a 3D action MOBA, which is what this is, right? The game is generally going to be a bit more slow, so you want to encourage people to interact more.
Yeah, no, completely agree.
It's hard. It's hard, man. I wouldn't know where to begin. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not the one developing the game. God bless, right?
Yeah.
So
it's just a fine line that you have to hit with towers. I mean, it's going to take time. And you don't want to have the situation, where you can tank, 6 shots or whatever in the early stages of the game and just be invincible under there and easily tower dive people, because it does become very frustrating for the other team then when they do get slightly behind and it lacks comeback at that point. But I do like the point that sort of getting brought up in MOBAs. Towers, you're there to protect, right? And they're not really there to protect you. They're just something that you can utilize as a safe zone, which is more safe, but not completely safe. It's not meant to be like your base. You're not meant to be invincible under there and guarantee 1-for-1 trades and everything. So it's just one of those things. But I do think a lot of it does also come down again just to the roster of characters and mobility, the lack of move speed in the early game, the lack of dashes in the early game, the lack of longer range dashes. In Overprime we have the Feng Mao dash going like super far. Gideon TP doesn't go so far in this, so it's hard to get out of tower range. Same with Boris RMB. As well as initiating under there. So I think a lot of it comes from that as well, even if you might equivalate sort of the damage of towers to something like League. You don't have the same mechanics and you can't revolve around the same style of play.
And it's like you said, like factor in mobility plus gank routes plus other things to do in your downtime as well. Maybe this is a reality where you need another camp to fight around, whether that's a gold buff or something else. I don't know. It might be the wrong thing, right? But it's worth considering is the point.
Yeah, it's just forcing more interaction, as you said. It's more gameplay, more interest in the lane, and not just standing there freezing and just that's your only option, right? You're sat there by the tower holding the wave and denying them from minions and stuff, or they're doing it to you, and then that's sort of the interaction. You don't have much else other than that, apart from shoving and backing. That's kind of the only lane dynamics you really see otherwise, right?
So Snitch asked what the ideal value is, right? My quick response to that is I can't tell you what the ideal value is, right? It's all relative to the minions and how they interact, base damages, scaling, all of the numbers under the hood. But it's for Strange Matter Studios to figure out, right? And to tweak and to work with. Now, they might not think there's a problem. I personally think there is.
It is very
very subjective, right?
Subjective, exactly. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, these are our opinions, though. So
yeah, of course, it's all opinion at the end of the day. So yeah, are there any other points you want to bring up now about Fault?
There's one
we
thing.
could talk about the roles, right? How does mid lane feel? How does like AD carry feel? And what spot they are?
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
sure. I mean, I'll just get into it. I think mages are they're okay in terms of itemization. It's a little bit cookie cutter if you go mana lens and Arcam, and then there's like some variation with like what's it called, War Aegis or something.
War Aegis, yeah.
But other than that, I feel like their damage is good.
Mhm.
Late game, definitely, it's pretty high. Early to mid game, it feels like I'm hitting minions way too long, and it feels like it's like Ray said, I can't walk up against a jungler, so I just sit there and freeze, try to get perfect CS.
I think really quickly as well, a big part of it is when you've got high cooldown abilities, which is all the Paragon remakes kind of have this problem. It's high cooldown, high mana. The damage isn't, it doesn't stick super well. So you don't even feel incentivized to have these repeated small trades where, like, right, I've got the wave in front of my tower, I'm going to chunk this guy as he goes for the CS, which is very League of Legends-esque, right? Like, the interaction isn't even there, and for you, it's not even worth your time trying to walk up and trade with this person because the risk is too high, right?
Oh, yeah. Also, I struggle to actually push in waves when it matters. When I force my opponent into a base, or I even kill him, I can never shove in the wave, so he loses something, I get a good back, I get a good feeling, it's satisfying, you know? Like, it's always like, I feel like I hit minions and they're not dying quick enough, so I can actually either rotate, let it be invading for wards, like, just interactions, right? I just sit there and I shove, and it just kills the enjoyment a little bit. Also, with junglers coming from 6 different angles in mid lane.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's like my general view of mid lane.
Just to chime in, sorry. Like, when you say the general consensus is that instead of, because we were just talking about like towers and everything, that it, like I said before, that it really is the minions, because it always comes back to I'm interacting with these white camps, these minions too much, and there could be different answers to these problems, right? Whether it's towers or there's minions or jungle champs, like are they too tanky? Do we not do enough damage? You know, etc. Are there not tools to do enough damage? Something like a hunter's machete. I know we have affliction, but you get the point, right? It's like there's several different answers to whatever problem that we might propose, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be one-to-one. Towers suck, nerf towers. Minions suck, nerf minions, etc. It's just right now the gameplay loop like isn't satisfying, like you said, and it like some things just feel off because there's like certain, I wouldn't say there's staples in the genre, right? But there's just certain things you can't really play for, and it feels really odd.
It's like in all these other MOBAs, like in League and in Smite, in mid game you hit the point way quicker where you one-shot the wave and you do stuff. And I feel like you hit the point in Fold just way too late, just way after the first Raptors, probably around the time of the second Raptors, maybe even after that. It's just, it doesn't feel like, yeah, you don't get to actually interact with anything, right?
Yeah, and Reverb just saying that in terms of sort of ganking the lanes again, especially mid lane, of how open it is. It's mainly just the contrast between mid and the side lanes in terms of gank ability. So again, it's just like there's so few places you have to ward on a side lane, especially on the dual lane due to the amount of wards they have. Whereas mid, you do have more areas in which you need to control in terms of vision. So even if you can buy sentry wards and cover a lot of these angles and stuff, you know, they're going to be contested with the jungle and such, and you are going to have just sort of these pockets where people are going to be able to walk through. And you're gonna have to play hard to one side of the lane, and it's gonna make it very awkward for you. There's just a few too many entrances, especially if you include like the high ground as well from above from each tower, which is commonly ganked from as well. Also adds another entrance into the lane. So yeah.
So I've actually got a question for you guys, because I just thought about this when we were talking about mid lane. You know, the amount of mid lane entrances that there actually are in Fault is actually the same that we had in Monolith Paragon, isn't it?
Yes.
But the difference is that the terrain's different.
Yes.
And a couple of other things. What do you guys think is the issue? Do you think it's minions, the fact that you can't like actually push them in fast enough at a certain point? Do you think
that's
like
part of it, but it's also due to the sort of the way the high ground's done, right? Like one side is like sort of like a little cliff, or like functionally a cliff, whereas the other side isn't, right? It's just more stairs, which gives you less high ground to work around and makes that other entrance more open to the lane, right? Which gives you more gank access, especially with characters that don't have high ground jumps, right? So therefore, yeah, it's like that, plus the lane's a bit more squishy in comparison to Monolith, right? If you think about the gank entrances and the sort of range you could view people coming from with the fog walls and stuff. Monolith, you had a little bit more room with that, right? And then you also think about how you get to those entrances. Like if you warded the river buff on Monolith, you can cover sort of the entrance from like OP Pit, for example, that goes around and towards your fog wall, and sort of just about cover the sort of other wall that's on their side, and that's not one you're worried about most of the time, right? The ones on their side. So yeah, it's mainly due to the placement of where the ward affects and how many of the entrances it covers, as well as sort of the accessibility to the lane from each entrance.
So,
It is mainly, I feel like it is the shadow wall that is right next to you, right next to your tower. That is the biggest issue for me, because I feel like that one just gives the jungler so much time advantage to actually run onto you, wherever you are in the lane. And I mean, obviously you can ward for that, but then there's the other high ground, which is also giving the jungler a big advantage. And the high ground is fine itself, because he actually needs to get a lot deeper into the jungle to get up in that high ground, so it's a lot more commitment to the play. But then the other shadow wall just right next to you is just, I mean, he just goes there. There's no really commitment. It's just like right at the entrance of the enemy jungle, but you know, if you want to gank, it's an easy, you can just easily go there. And I feel like that's just too much, that you have both sides, that you have like a really easy access, I don't know, to the lane.
I think it also doubles in with the way the jungle is. It's almost not worth their time farming a camp for a certain amount of time, right? So they're going to be just running around looking to spam gank your lane, and mid is the most accessible, right? And we can talk about it.
Jungle gank pressure.
Yeah, there's constant threat all the time, and you don't even have a downtime of like, you know, I've got 60 seconds where he's reset, he needs to clear his camps, and I've got this freedom to work with, and I can play the wave how I want. A lot of the time, you're just too scared to walk up. And if you're not even playing Gideon, but even he's quite vulnerable, if you're not even playing this where you've got the escape, you just feel like a sitting duck.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, we already spoke about like solo lane, right? Solo lane, just, I don't know what the solution is there. Something else to fight around, more ways to interact.
Yeah.
Teleport scroll is in the game, but is it worth committing 400 gold to TP over to the duo side on a tower only, not even on a friendly unit? I don't really know. Like, we haven't played the game enough to really figure this shit out, right? But part of that comes down to trading patterns in the solo lane. Is basically, why wouldn't you freeze? I can't ever really dive. It's not really worth my time to invade. If I can get a buff, that's great, but the timing is quite small anyways. You can run to mid lane and gank mid lane, but again, it's why would I give up a wave of XP and gold just to even risk doing this? Where's the payoff, you know? And that kind of comes into, you get 200 gold for a kill, for example, right? Is that high enough? I personally think it's probably a bit too low, but then the XP is also quite high, so there's some tweaking that could happen there.
Yeah.
And then obviously we spoke about jungle as well with all the issues previously. So I think duo lane's a big one, especially as the game feels like it plays almost exclusively around the duo lane right now.
I mean, ADC is a ridiculously powerful role at the moment. If you factor in the Raptors and funneling onto them and all the gold income, the way these sort of effects scale onto each other, especially with TB, with his R and RMB, both scaling so heavily off his stats, along with then, you know, Infinity Edge, whatever, and P-Blade, and whatever you want to call them. It just gets pretty obnoxious how strong they can get. So you kind of have to get them to that point, and you're one to that point first, or else, you know, you end up struggling throughout the whole game.
Yeah, Raptors are a big one for me. So if you want to make the comparison, Predecessor, it's got the Paragon style. You know, you get power plus gold plus move speed plus X, right? It's a scaling objective. It benefits the team as a whole. That's great. I think it's one of the best things about Predecessor, and we can get onto that in a bit. And then obviously with Overprime, the big issue we've always said from day one is, why the fuck do I care about this Raptor that gives me 1 card point if I kill it, which is basically like 100 gold if you want a metric for comparison. Gives me 1 TP and I get a shield for my team. Great. Is there use you can get out of that? Yeah, sure. But it's not a big objective that works as a ticking clock.
You do it if you have time, basically.
Yeah. And so the issue with the Raptors in full is basically, even though they're super impactful, because they're basically 3 kills, each one is worth a kill, effectively, in terms of gold and XP. Plus you get the favor, which if you stick that on your carry, you've got all these exponentially scaling stats. You know, you've got your crit, your attack speed, your power. It's all adding up. And each one is worth, you know, if you look at like base cost efficiencies, you're looking at about 30 gold for like 1 power, for example, or about 35, 38, whatever it is. But then when you have like 4 red items and you've got all of these free stats you're getting and they all compile together, it becomes a massive issue. But if you're playing in the solo lane, why would I want to rotate for the Raptor? Even though it's the way to win the game, because duo lane basically plays around that where AD is such a strong role. but it doesn't feel rewarding as a mid laner, as a solo laner, to commit all of your time and energy to this resource, and only one person gets the payoff. And the payoff is so backloaded where you don't really feel it until you hit that item threshold. But then when you hit it, you're god on the map, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, completely agree.
I mean, at the end of the day, right? It's like the favor system is like, or how do I say it? The actual what are they? The aspects? That's what they're called. Sorry, favor and aspects. The aspects, it's a pretty good system in an idea where it's like you have these choices that you can make and all this stuff. The issue is that when you put the scaling factor in it in the most item dependent and stat dependent role, and then give it like extra scaling, which then it's not about like, it's not that there shouldn't be extra scaling in the scaling role. It's that the way Raptors work is that there's a differential that's just made up by having Raptors, where that's 3 more favored than you have than the other guy, which then turns into 3% attack speed into like 0.75% crit. I'm trying to remember all the other ones, but you get the idea. Is that you're creating this? It's effectively like a win more thing, where because you got this, then it's whatever, and you should have things. It should be relevant, but right now it's just, I don't know. It's like it feels really weird, where it feels like only one person on the map really benefits from the idea of favor.
Mm-hmm.
Is kind of the shitty thing about it.
Yeah, and I mean, favor, the way it works. And again, you know, as far as I'm aware, it's a system that's going to get reworked. I was a little bit shocked that going from the Christmas alpha, they didn't even touch it. I was like 7 months. Like, surely you've at least tweaked it to make it passable for the time being. But, you know, I guess their time is better spent elsewhere. That's fair enough, right? But right now, the way the favor is, it's just fucking out of control, man. Like, I don't really know what else to say. And in terms of instant gratification of you play the game in its current state, it just feels off. And the lane, like the power differentiation between the lanes and all of this, you know, why in duo lane wouldn't I just spam gank the duo lane, focus this purely, freeze and deny the enemy carry, play around Raptors 24/7. You get like what, about 3 Raptors. Each set of Raptors is worth about 650, 700 gold. I'm getting this favor. It's backloaded. It's all of these scaling stats. Like, the AD is basically king on the map. It's the only thing that really matters is how it feels, short of people getting obscenely fed.
Yep.
It's weird as well, because part of it, there aren't like, I don't want to say it's like a kit issue, right? But whenever you play AD, half the time, whenever you get like King's Castle or something like that, you feel incredibly safe for the most part, especially when you have this support, which also like has other tools in order to help you, right? It's like the things that can kill you, barring like a really strong mage or a really strong carry, like just doesn't, I don't know.
The issue is as well is when you factor in, there's no comeback mechanic to favor points, right? Whereas if you think about it, it's basically a form of gold in terms of its raw stats that you're getting, and it scales as the game goes on with the more items you get, etc., right? But it's not like you can have comeback XP and comeback gold. This guy's got a kill streak. Oh, you kill him, you get a bounty of 700 gold or whatever, right? If you fall into a favor deficit as the game goes on, it gets a lot harder. And I think as an average casual player, you won't even know what the fuck is going on. Now, I don't know if there's an indicator that shows how much favor this person has or what. Maybe there is, right? But it's really hard for readability, and
you can't judge. Is this guy super strong? Like, does he have 30 favor? Oh yeah.
He could be 0-0-0, but have 20 favor at 25 minutes if he's been farming up a storm, and you know he's got all the Raptors and fulfilled the weird objectives that most people don't even know. You know, like first tower kill everyone, favor 50 minions, you get a piece of favor. Like,
yeah,
the clarity is completely lacking. Plus, there are issues with scaling and comeback potential and all these different things. And you know, like, I'm glad like it's a placeholder system, and that's wonderful and all. But like as it stands right now, it's not good. And even though I'm shitting on the system, it's not to say you guys are retarded for even doing this. Like, that's not the issue. The issue to me is that just make sure that this doesn't carry on. You know, really accentuate the point. That's the point of feedback. Is I don't think it's healthy for the game moving forward. And so just put the point out there and make sure it changes.
Yeah, and it's also how it ties into the items, like I've said before as well, in terms of, so say, with the scaling stats and everything. It's sort of that when you pick those 2 aspects that you want to go for, you almost want to pick 2 different colors in most cases to have more variety, because even though you don't gain a huge amount, right, from the favor and the scaling and stuff. It's not massive, it's not absolutely game changing. It still feels worse, especially if like you're a casual player and stuff. If you build into like your red tree and stuff and you have double red aspects and you can only level up the red favor, but then you want to buy like a green item because you need it for a specific situation, right, or a blue item or whatever for whatever reason, it has less sort of open options, right? So it's like those options become even weaker for you than they already are, right? Because you don't have the favor scaling onto the cards,
Yeah,
which makes them feel even worse to buy.
Yeah, for a system that's meant to be about like, you know, the depth of the system and all the things you can do on it and the variety it offers you and all the bonus stats you get and et cetera, it, at least from my point of view, it actually does the opposite, where it does railroad you into building certain things. You've got to basically stick to your color. You can only commit these points to that one color. As the game goes on, you're getting less gold efficiency from it, so you're kind of silly not to all in if you're AD, all in red. Why wouldn't you, right? These are the stats you need. It is nice that it tries to break roles up where, you know, blue is tailored for mages and red is tailored for carries and green for tanks and all this sort of thing. I get the idea behind it, but the execution is flawed, obviously, and that's the big issue. And I think you can have a League of Legends-esque rune system with the aspects or the attributes or whatever they are, right? Yes. You can do that, and I think there are good ideas because it helps mix up gameplay. But then you've got the other side of it, which is pulling you down, which is you're completely railroading these builds, and you actually lack freedom from it.
Yeah, it's effectively a deck at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, not 100% close, but yeah, it's there. It's part way.
Pretty much.
Yeah, cool. Next point in terms of fault.
Do we have left? Have you anything left, boys?
You might want to wrap it up because it's already been an hour about fault, right?
That's true. Maybe we should move on to
holy shit, it has been. What the
predecessor.
fuck?
I told you we can go on a bit.
I just space out when I listen to Ray. It's just something about his voice, dude.
Message me after, man.
Cool. As I said, Reverb, early in the game. Late game, towers are fine. Cool. So, in terms of predecessor then, the first thing I want to talk about mainly in terms of sort of to contrast from Fault and such is sort of the feedback in terms of combat and auto attacking and, you know, readability of abilities going off and auto attacks and how they actually feel to use, right? I think predecessors pretty much got that really well. Like, I think they've got a few issues, like some things like murder quarters do sound a little pea shooterish, but at least they're prominent, right? And they're there, and you do know what they sound like, and you can play around them in that regard. But that's one thing I really do enjoy about predecessor, and it's probably one of my favorite things about the game as a whole, was actually just the readability of gameplay, right?
The feedback is wonderful, yeah. Really, it is the closest to Paragon out of all these three.
Yeah.
It just, you see abilities like, I don't know, you just feel feedback. If you get hit, if you hit something, it just feels good, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, like, even with the way the damage numbers show up and stuff like that, it really does just feel like almost an homage to Paragon, right? In that sense.
It's really satisfying to minion hit. It's like this little golden fontaine that comes out of it, and it's like just a noise. It's bog.
Yeah. Anything else you guys like about predecessor from your time?
I mean, I think the clear distinction for me, and is, again, we're going to rail on the same point, right? But like, obviously, visually, I think it's probably one of the most seamless out of the three. You can make an argument with Overprime, but, you know, the animations look great. Sound design is pretty solid, right? There's a few things that are a bit lacking, but, you know, just like you said, coming off of Fault, like, these are things that Fault could improve upon, and it's voice lines, it's better sound design, it's smoother animations, and, you know, and that's not even talking about, you know, frame rates or anything like that. It's just the readability and all of the things that are going on your screen. And this is where predecessor, to me, like, is what makes it stand out in its own niche compared to the other games, right? It's really what it's got going for it.
We already talked a little bit about it, but I think the objectives are really
objectives would be the second best,
especially the Fangtooth. It's always Fangtooth, right? That we have to talk about, because OP is just so straightforward, and it's fine. It's like a Baron Nash above. It should be powerful, and it most of the times it is. But then it's like Fangtooth, and I think they have a good system with the stacking power system, and you get out of combat movement speed at some point, and then
I mean, like, are the values right? Maybe not, but like, in general, the idea is there, right?
Exactly. And it's functional right now, even though, like, it hasn't got all its effects right. I'd love to see like, you know, let's just straight power per one and the different effects as it scales, kind of like how Old Dragon worked in League, where you got the different effects as it went up. I do like the mechanic, it is nice, and I do also like it, again, in contrast to Fault being that one big single objective, right? It makes things like when you do get a smite and everything a bit more impactful on the one big objective for a jungler as a role, more satisfying, when you have this one big thing to focus around rather than, you know, just stealing one of the small raptors and then, you know, you can still lose the other two. So it can feel much more satisfying and sort of release that dopamine a bit better when you see it steal an objective like a Fangtooth.
It's kind of what I said about the issues with Favor, and, you know, obviously you want to dump it all on your AD carry and Fault, right? And you want to just feed all the Raptors over to them. When you've got the one big objective and it's a team-wide benefit, like, it feels rewarding. It encourages these team fights. It's, you know, it doesn't matter who you are on the map, you get something for turning up to this fight. And part of the appeal of these games are the big 5v5s, the interactions, the way the team comps play out, all of these different things. And having that one big single objective, both in terms of inflating the time to kill to give more window for, you know, people collapsing on it and creating the fight, having that, and then having the payoff be a bit higher. And I'm not to say that the payoff in Fault isn't high, because it's ridiculous right now. You know, 3 kills plus Favor, it's basically what it is. But as a team-wide boon, you know, it just feels more cohesive to have an objective like that. And then the benefit is it works as a ticking clock as well, where if I capture 4 Fangtooths, my entire team is getting a shit ton of power, and it's scaling exponentially, right? Elder Dragon in League, you get the 4 dragons, you get the Soul, you get the Elder Dragon. Again, you've got this massive benefit. Even in Smite, there's like Omni Fury. You know, you get these stacked minions running down the wave.
Yes.
There's utility from doing it, whereas Raptors in Fault are basically a win more situation of, I'm just going to keep dumping more stats into this person. Will this help me win the game? Sure, but like it just doesn't feel the same in terms of readability. It doesn't play out the same. It's all focused on that one person. If that one person fucks up, then you've got no benefit from doing this, and there's no gain from the 40 minutes of hard work you've done as a team and making all the right plays. Carry gets caught out, and then it's all gone, right?
Yep. Yeah, no, completely agree. And yeah, that's pretty much, yeah, you summed it up. Are there any other points you'd like to talk about, Pred, in terms of good things?
It's hard because there's not really much to say,
there isn't
right?
much, yeah.
It's, out of the 3, does the least amount of content, right? Least amount of heroes, least amount of items. Like, I don't know what else.
It's not to take away from the game, right? Because obviously they release these small closed alpha tests. You know, they're aware of their position and everything else like that. But I mean, you know, there's issues with the map, the item shop, and we can go into those in a little bit more detail. But at the same time, it is in the state it's in. They don't try and pretend like it's anything different. They've not got a massive hype train trying to follow them. You know, at the end of the day, in terms of benefits, I'm like, yeah, visually, feedback-wise, direction's all great. Everything else is more like gameplay orientated, right? And there are those issues.
Yeah. I keep going. I'm just sorting out the video. I'm trying to find a way to get my predecessor footage in.
You could argue that they have a poor baseline in certain stuff, even though it's not a priority on their list. It just, the baseline in terms of balance feels poor. Like, it's not much thought into it, like the baseline of the item shop. I mean, obviously it's placeholder icons, but then also like it has no depth to it. Like it feels awkward to build items. For example, just pick an example. There's like a Rabadon's adaptation of predecessor, and all you do is like you stack up these 2 items, and then you have to pay a ridiculous amount of gold to complete it, when the bonus it gives is actually not that good. And obviously there's issues like that in any mobile, like maybe not in any, but in a lot of MOBAs. But it just feels like the baseline was a bit lacking when it came out.
Yeah.
I mean, the big thing for me, really quickly, is that, you know, there was that massive post they put out before their alpha weekend, and personally, I hate seeing this shit, right? Like, I hate the whole let's temper expectations, because we built the hype up almost irresponsibly, and people are expecting something, but you know what, guys, it's not really quite there yet. Can you bear with us, right? I understand the idea behind it, but it does rub me the wrong way a little bit, right? And I think Fault is guilty of that a little bit as well with the Reddit post. And guys, we've got all of this hype going for us, but you need to just relax because it's not quite there yet. Just give it time. It will be there, but just give it time. But it's the doubling back, right? But Pred with the idea with the items, it's like, you know, we've held back items, or we know it's an issue, we're going to work on it. But for me, when you put out these models and you let people have access to your game, they're just going to judge it on the merit of what it is, right? They're not invested in the fucking game in terms of they're not on the staff, they're not on payroll. They're there to have a good time, you know, and to enjoy the game. That's all they care about. So they can only enjoy what they've got available to them then and there. And so with the items in that, when I see a system like the system in Pred, where it's just flat stats, The math doesn't even make sense in some of them, whereas like, Fult's got that going for them, if nothing else, right? Like cost efficiencies work. Each power on an item is worth a set amount of gold, and it all makes sense, When I see the system in Pred, it does make me worry where you're already lacking these things, and to me, it's like a lack of foresight, right? It's like you've developed this mock system, but the mock system is inherently flawed. If you knew it was flawed, why would you even do it in the first place? Same with like jungle buffs and putting out without, no red and blue buff or no jungle buffs. You say it's something you plan to do in the future, but why even put out a model if that's the case anyway? You should know that this is inherent to the gameplay, is super important with the game loop and how it functions. And are you just saying that you knew it was an issue and you were holding it back because of resources and timing? I don't know, right? I can't know that. But if they didn't even know it was an issue and this is the case, then I'm like, fuck me, man, that's worrying, because they should be more on the pulse with this stuff, right?
It is like, it's like, but this whole answer is like, yeah, bigger things are coming, and it's like, why are you even putting it out there then? What do I have to test that is not the placeholder, not just like, I don't know. This also goes to Fold, right? They always keep saying like bigger things to come, fixes to come. So what am I testing then? Like I give you feedback to a system that's gonna get removed, or like and Predecessor is the same thing. It's like the baseline was just lacking in a lot of stuff. So you're like, okay, cool, like it feels nice, and they always made it clear, to be fair, that they have the highest priority just on the field. They want you to know how it feels, and I guess that's fair. But yeah, it's, I don't know, like what am I gonna? I played 4 games of it and was like, okay, I'm done now. I understood the item shop, I understood all the heroes. There's only 9 heroes, right? And now I'll move on. So
it's like, what feedback can I even give at this point? And like you said, it's, am I critiquing the systems in the game with like the lack of buffs and items? But then you're telling me that the test isn't about that, so you've got a solution coming down the pipeline. That's fine, that's great. But at that point, I'm like, sure, it feels great, but the game is hollow, so why do I care? I'll just come back in a couple of months and test it out then. And that's completely justified, right? Like, that's fine. That's what the alpha weekends are there for. But like you say, from the player perspective, it's just not that engaging, for all of these different reasons. And so when you're trying to ride off the hype and get community interest involved and make people choose your game over the 2, 3, 4 competitives that are out there, like, why this one? What have you got to offer me?
Yeah, and when it comes to the weekends, actually, I think it is actually the right way to do it. In general, free-to-play weekends of all the content available, just due to the fact that it allows you to, like, if you're actually looking for feedback on how the game works, right, that's the best way to do it, right? In terms of you want to know how the game feels for the first weekend and stuff. The second weekend, you're going to change a bunch of stuff, right, and get the feedback then. So you've got the big contrast between the 2 weekends then. You've got the people concentrated more into one time frame for the time that they want to play, which will then allow them to then, again, greater test those elements or whatever that they've changed, rather than gradually over a week or whatever. And then again, when all the content's available, unlike, for example, Fault, where you have to buy the next tier up pack to get all the characters, you can get feedback, very quickly in terms of balance and stuff and statistics on all the characters, because they're available to everyone, right? Whereas otherwise it's skewed statistics at that point, based on who has access to what content. So I do think it is actually the better way to do it.
No, I think it ties into what Reverb asked, right? Like, the idea of, well, you don't have to pay for it. Nobody's making you play this game, so why do you care, right? But the difference is that you have access to these individual weekends. Even if there's issues, it is treated more like a prototype. Even if it's incorrect, from the market perspective, you're looking at it, you're like, well, I'm paying for this product versus this product isn't even available and I can have some fun with it and see it iterate. And I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, right, like, if you want access to early access, then pay for it and we'll limit XYZ or whatever the fuck. Like, there's nothing inherently wrong with it. It's just the perception it gives to you, to your consumers, to the player base, to the community. And like what you said in terms of Predecessor, it's great. Like, you can play the weekend, you can, they implemented like the 2-man duo system, which is great. Now you can play over friend, you can get a better feel for the game, and the expectations aren't crazy inflated, saying this is the next crazy big thing. If they're going to get there, they'll show you they're going to get there, right? And equally, they might fail. I don't know, but you don't build this crazy amount of hype for yourself and set yourself up with these crazy expectations that you can never meet, which is part of the issue I feel like Fultz ran into, where the hype has been so high, but it just needs more time.
Yeah, completely.
I mean, they realized that themselves, right? They made, the day before Brady came out with this video, hey guys, like, keep it down, right? These are indie developers. And it's all fair points, but then just don't do otherwise, right? Don't do this marketing that seems like this is this ridiculous thing, everything's changed from December, when in reality a lot of things did, but a lot of things also didn't, right?
And it always makes sense from like a business perspective. Of course, it makes sense, right? But to put it really frankly, the players don't give a shit about that. So it's not even like an argument you can even put to them and be like, well, you know, we needed it for financial support, or, you know, the hype is good for the player base, you name it. It's like, it's not really an argument that players are ever going to sympathize with. So it's not something you can even really address, right?
Yeah. True. Okay.
I mean, for Pred moving forward, like,
Mhm.
what does it need? What would you like to see?
I mean, it's mostly depth and content, right? It's, of course, more characters is great, but in terms of the item system needs to change, which again, it's all stuff they've planned, right? And they said they've got planned. My main issue with it, again, it was that whole placeholder system, like the power, right? Instead of AD and AP, they're doing AD and AP in these separate damage sort of scaling stats in future, but they haven't done it now, when it's just as easy to implement, you know, and you can start balance testing it immediately with your testers. So why
Yeah,
give
make
them
it harder
power
down the line, right?
Yeah, exactly. So why give them power? Why make them test power when it's not even going to be a thing in future? All they can say is, well, it's not balanced at the moment or whatever, and that's cool. You don't care because you're changing it, right? So it's really pointless in that regard. I'd rather just they implemented the systems they intended to in the first place. I don't like these sort of placeholder pseudo systems just for the purpose of getting the game out there, when the other one was just as easy to implement and balance around. So
Yeah, that's
yeah.
always my my issue with a lot of these situations that crop up. It's like, well, you've got a placeholder system in, and I'm like, okay, but surely you must have put some thought into this system to begin with, and maybe you was experimenting. I don't really know, right? And that's fine. But when I see there's glaring issues with the gameplay loop, with the way your items work, and having the lack of passives and actives and things like this, or fault maybe the way certain interactions work, whatever it may be, if they're missing even the most basic building blocks, I'm like, should I really trust these people to make this game and it's going to be good down the line and it's going to be what we all want it to be? It does damage my faith in their ability to do it. And it's not to say these people aren't talented and they're not doing hard work. Of course they are. But from my point of view as a player, I'm like, fuck me, man. If this is what they're coming out with day one, and they've put time and effort into this, and now they have to retroactively go back and fix it all again, that they should have known this from the offset.
It's like the whole Riot Games 200 years of experience meme all over again, right?
Yeah.
Why do they come up with this shit? Like, what is this, right? With the affiliate and whatever.
Yeah,
It's
where's
the
the
same
rationale?
thing here, right? It's like, why even implement it if you're just gonna change it, or like if you almost immediately know you're gonna change it? So.
And that's the thing. It's not like these games have been in development for like 6 months. It's like, no, there's been a good year, 2 years put into some of these projects, right? There's been time, which is where a lot of my criticism comes from. I'm like, there's been time, but you've put out things that have got glaring issues, and did nobody catch you along the way? I don't know. Like, is it really just a case of placeholder? It's fine, but we're reallocating our resources and we're doing what we deem is important. Fair enough. But then again, that comes into the issue of you show it to the public, they get a feel for the game, they only see it as what they're playing, and then you've kind of blown your load, right? Like, your marketing is people will react to what they see.
Mm-hmm.
They've only got to go off of what they're playing, right? And you can make all the promises in the world, but until it happens, nothing happens. And that's why with the early access thing, for example, the amount of games out there that have promised the world when it comes to early access and it doesn't materialize. Again, not saying Fault's going that way. I don't think that's the case at all. But you can make all the promises in the world, but players aren't going to believe you till they see it. It's that simple.
Yeah, completely agree. In terms of yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I want to say one more thing is, I was very sad when Sergeant Smokey was talking about competitive. I feel like they see competitive as like a thing down the line, and I'm a competitive creature. I need competitiveness. Otherwise I won't play the game. And I have to say it blandly, I think a lot of people think like me. If there's no, I don't know, even meme tournaments, just let it be memes. Like, let it be low price with just competitive nature. I don't see a point in it, to be playing it. So that was like one of the most downsides from professors that they were talking about it so far away that competitive could even be a thing.
You don't need to enforce it, but you should allow it, right? So then you will have things like PCL come up, which was in Paragon, where it's a community tournament, but it had nothing to do with Epic Games itself.
The thing is,
you should always allow it, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, and I think they will allow it. And then he said if people want to do tournaments, but also you have to implement systems, and they have to be in priorities. There have to be a spectator mode. There has to be custom games. Like, all this stuff has to be implemented. And it has to be on a priority list. And if competitive is not a high in nature, then I don't see it happening very quickly.
it's like there's certain bits of content that is needed to play competitive. Your hero pool needs to be a certain amount. You need to have a certain amount of heroes so you can actually draft. The roles need to be evenly distributed, or else you're just going to pinch at the roll. One of the common issues that we had in certain iterations of OP whenever we were practicing for the tournament was just the fact that the support pool just got so choked.
Mm-hmm.
Even in the finals, we came up with the fucking howitzer pick because it choked the support pool in a certain way, and things like that. So you need a comfortable pool of heroes, and that's the one thing about Pred. Not only their philosophy, like you said, Felix, but really just the fact that they have 9 heroes. And yes, they do have a lot of polish, but since they focused on that polish, getting the heroes out and getting the spectator mode are the two most important things to competitive. You can just say, yeah, go do whatever you want, and then tournament organizers and players will do their thing. But if we don't have the tools to do it, then we just never will. Because we just can't. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Yeah. And it would be good to have earlier tournaments. I think, of course, priority, I think, like you saying, of course, we're competitive and stuff, but ranked, I think, is really important. Again, you saw it in Paragon, right, with the whole Agora.gg, the leaderboard stuff. People craved having ranked in the game. It was ridiculous.
They craved so hard.
Yeah, and they
You need a
literally their
reason
own
to play,
version.
right?
Yeah, exactly. You need that reason to grind and improve and get better at the game and see that fancy number go up when you are improving stuff. It helps a lot in terms of replayability for the game, and helps with lack of depth, if anything, right? Like predecessor, almost you'd want to play it more if there was a leaderboard of that regard, right? It wouldn't help that much because I still think the item system is really important, but it is a larger element there when you do start stacking the depth on top of each other.
It makes me want to play
systems.
Fault. I want to be
exactly.
rank 1.
Yeah,
It doesn't mean shit.
exactly.
I still want to be it.
Yeah.
It's just something I want, right?
Yeah, and a lot of
Yeah,
people
no,
are playing
exactly.
improve,
It's like
so.
even just having, like Felix said, even just having that carrot, it's nothing, but it's enough for someone like us, right? Where it's like,
carrot.
no, it's like I'm never gonna be like, oh, I'm fault rank 1 or he's fault rank 1. Like who cares, right? But it's like it's just something that I can go for. It is the carrot.
Yes.
This is why ranked modes and things like that were so important. I don't know. It's just like just to have anything to do rather than just play this game, find out the broken strat, and just abuse it, get bored of it because it's broken, and then just wait for it to be patched.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah, completely agree. I think it's really important to have at some point. And in terms of the tournament, I did actually enjoy the one OP did. I'm glad they did it. I don't think they needed the prize pool. I think that was silly.
It was amazing.
To have
I
a new
loved
prize
it.
pool, but it was just
Yeah.
so enjoyable to have a tournament there, even if new players want to hop on and play it, whether it's experienced or whatever.
fuck, it was
And
fun.
just hop in. And I like the formatting was a little scuff across it, but in the end, it actually was okay. In terms of the way the formatting turned
engagement
out.
everyone had, like the
yeah,
people that were
exactly.
just playing casually, and they still are sometimes. But as soon as they had the opportunity, it was like, "Fuck it, dude, let's gather my friends and just see how
Play
far
some
we can get."
5v5s, yeah.
Most of
It's
the
like
people
a
you
sense
see,
of community was built, right? It's
most of the
huge.
people you see playing Overprime right now and streaming it, these were all part of their own little team, right? And they all had their own fucking. They had their 5-man. They had their 5-man. You're scrimming with each other. You're getting to know each other. It's actually really good for community cohesion, and
Yeah.
it brings the level of play up really, really quickly.
Yeah.
And so when you realize what the level of play is and what the meta is, you can really start to show these glaring issues, And in Overprime, there was glaring issues, but they really came to the forefront because people were pushing the game further to its limits. Now, were people amazing god tier? Of course not, right? Neither were we. But the point is that at least you can do that by having some form of competitive scene, whether that be ranked, a community tournament, whatever it is.
Yeah, it's just a fun experience to have, and I'm glad it did occur. I don't see, again, you have to have all the systems implemented, like customs and everything, right? But once you got those in, it's on itself, right? It just keeps going. It doesn't take that much effort because you can have the community organize it themselves, right? At the end of the day, you can get, there's so many people in the community, like Narendra was in Paragon and stuff, who ran PCL, they'd happily just hop on, they moderate it for you, they organize it for you. There's people that want to cast, there's people that want to, do the camera work, and they do all these things for you, and you don't have to run the tournament per se, right? As devs, you can focus on making your game, and if anything, it gives you more top level sort of balance play, right? In terms of top down balancing, it gives you more statistics on that and stuff, and tournament meta and what people are picking and banning and why, and allows you to see strengths and stuff for characters that way. So if anything, it's just better as a dev to have these things occurring in the long term, and it is just, as I say, it's really enjoyable as a player to have those things there as an option,
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know what Fault's plans are for competitive. I'm sure there's something in the pipeline, right? From what little I've heard, they're aware of it. They're actively going to think about it, whatever it may be, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. But even now, I could say to somebody, well, I think AD's a broken role and it's way too overloaded, and things like Narbash are ridiculous for these reasons because of, the heal's too strong and the amount of damage it mitigates, and it makes trading not even worthwhile. It's too safe. Interacts with
support
power.
item.
Yeah, so support items and how it gets money for free by just standing there and flicking on its hill. I can tell you all of these things, but when you actually see it in a 5v5 setting and you see how ridiculous it is and
You
how
can't
much it
prove it.
dominates,
You
yeah,
can't prove
exactly.
it.
It's just my opinion at that point. But if you go and if the tournament winner is abusing this shit and you're like, wow, that's ridiculous, in the same way that in Overprime we're playing with a bunch of blinks and we're freezing like crazy and we're doing X, Y, and Z, people are like, wow, it's broken, the game sucks, right?
Mhm.
But you wouldn't know that if that didn't happen in the first place. And that's for the betterment of the game moving forward.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, completely agree. Cool. In terms of bringing it back towards predecessor again, because we're sort of straying away from that. I do want to talk about sort of their. So we've always talked about the visuals and sort of the way they've come out with all the sort of feedback to the game and everything. But in terms of like the first skin, for example, they teased, which I think the teaser was amazing because I absolutely love that they put the Gideon skin that they've got teased sort of in the background of the teaser of the Murdoch one. I thought
it's
that was
cute
really
as fuck,
smart.
right?
I love little things like that, and I think it's
Oh,
a
yeah.
great thing. But in terms of like quality of skin, if we want to sort of contrast it between Fault and Pred, what's your guys' opinions?
I mean, we can only judge the Murdoch skin, right? It's their own.
Yeah.
their
Murdoch
only own
versus the
content skin,
other,
kind of,
other Fault
right?
skins, yeah.
And then in Fault we have Lumberjack, we have Cyberquong,
Bone
what-
Collector Chimera, and
Bone
then
Collector.
there's there is one more, right?
There's the commando skins as well, but then you're venturing
Oh,
into recolor territory, right? So it's not like it's completely like
Mhm.
a redesigned skin or anything like that.
I swear there's one more though, right? Like there's one more that I missed. Maybe not. I don't know.
maybe there's, but yeah, maybe
The
I mean,
military ones.
the obvious thing that
Balakabalik
people
one.
memed about is like the predecessor Jailer skin just looked really higher res than the Cyberquong, for example.
Yeah, high quality.
And I think that is true. I mean, obviously it is true, but I don't know how can you judge, or like how can you lead from that to, are they able to make their own content? Like, is their own
Well,
content gonna
I
be
think
good?
that's the important thing, right? Is that when you're not putting out much, and then you start showing, right, we're going to design our own content. It could only be a skin, and I don't want to undervalue how hard that is in terms of artwork and what goes
Mhm.
into it. And again, you know more about this than me, Blood, right? But the idea is that they tease a skin, they release it. It looks pretty good from what I can see, man. Like I don't want to sound deflated or anything like that, but it looked pretty cool. The way they handled it was great, and it's promising moving forward, right? Because they've shown on their resume, well, they did this, and it turned out pretty good. So that's great moving forward.
Yeah, completely.
Whereas
agree.
like, I look at in terms of Cyber Kwong, I look at that and instantly, like you said, Shinx, it looks a little bit low res. It looks a bit tacked on. It's not an awful skin, but would I pay for it? No. Like, and I want to see a higher bar be set, basically, right?
I mean, it's
Especially-
like when you see things like that Murdoch skin in Pred, or for example, the Paragon skins like the Raven Sparrow we always go on about and stuff. You just see that quality and you're just like, wow, like that makes me want to play the character, right? I mean, it's also like League when I see these Spirit Blossom splash arts that just came out, and I saw that Kindred skin. I was just like, I want to go back and play Kindred in League, right? I love that skin. I think that's super cool, and I want to play that character. When I see Cyber Kwong or the Lumberjack Boris, I don't get that at all. That same feeling.
I think the issue these
in terms
games
of the
have as
quality.
well is that because, again, they'd be crazy to try and, you've got to compete with the previous skins, right? You're going to include them in the game. And so in that situation, you've got to compete with the bar that Epic set.
Exactly.
And good fucking luck. Good fucking luck to you,
It
man.
is
Because they
really
did a bloody
hard.
good job,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, it's super hard. So anything you release is never, maybe not never, but it's going to be very difficult. to even
Very
hit that
hard.
standard to begin with. And again, why would I buy, this Kwong skin or something like that? Or, let's say...
Undertow Gideon.
Yeah,
something
like
that.
Undertow Gideon's like one of the best skins in the game, right? One of my favorites was always the Ice Queen or the Ice Lich Aurora skin, whatever it was. I thought that was super sick, right?
Yes.
So if you release an Aurora skin, why would I want to buy your skin? And your monetization, you'd need this to pay for your servers, your staff, you name it, development of the game. Why would I do this when I can just earn this in game with currency? And I'm not going to say you're kind for doing that and offering that outlet, because rightfully you probably should, right? But it just makes it really hard. So you've got to do better. You really do.
Yeah, and the thing is, even though you are letting it fit in-game currency, they're still cheaper in most cases in coins than the actual ones that they have, right, in terms of Fault and stuff, most of the skins. So they're their own made skins. So if you've got the option between like this Raven Sparrow and a Cyber Kwong, and the Cyber Kwong's worth, if you look back to League, right, in terms of actual monetary value rather than their fake currency, they're looking at like above legendary skin prices for these kind of skins, right, which I think is ridiculously high in the first place. I want a quality skin, right, and this is going to be one that doesn't doesn't have different visual effects, one that doesn't have different voice lines and stuff. This is literally just going to be a different in slight of model and sort of the visuals of the character. I want something really good quality, and the Paragon ones do offer that in terms of less coins than the default ones. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And again, I appreciate the work that goes into it. It's
Of
not
course.
easy. It's not cheap, right? But I
It's
think
really
it's a case
difficult.
of if you put the work in, you will reap the rewards, right? People will want to buy the high quality shit. Part of the reason why Epic died in the way it did in my mind was their monetization model was atrocious, right? Gave up way too much shit when it came to the boxes and the keys and the things you got for free. Too many recolor skins. Like, why would I played the game religiously. Why would I even put my money into it? I think I put like what, $30 into it, you know? Because I didn't feel the need to. There was nothing there that really stuck out to me.
Actually, just a question on that for monetization. I kind of want to like go down the row for this one.
Sure.
Like, how much money did you actually spend on skins? Like Blood, you can start. Like, how much in
Paragon? I mean, mine's inflated due to the fact that the loot box system existed alongside my stream, and people donated for the fact that they wanted to see me open loot boxes. So it is inflated.
But
with
how
that.
much did you pay out of your own money and not including
Out of
all
my
that?
own? It's at least a few hundred minimum.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Ray, you already answered that. Felix, how much did you spend, like specifically on skins?
I would say $50. It might be a bit less. I think I'm more close to Ray's opinion that I didn't see the need to. I always wanted the Bumblebee Howitzer skin. I never got it because I couldn't actually buy it. I had to exchange.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
just the loot box shit.
Loot boxes were
and I was like,
terrible, yeah.
I'm not gonna do it. Like, why would I? You know?
I remember I was stuck with the same Rampage, like the molten one or the rock one, right? I was stuck with
Yeah.
the same color, even though I wanted like the brown and red one, but I had the white one instead, but because I didn't want to buy boxes.
Yeah, it's really a good point that their monetization was lacking. It was.
Yeah.
It definitely was.
But Undead, how much do you think you spent on Paragon, like in terms of
think-
skins?
100, 200, somewhere around that.
Okay, because me, I only bought one skin, and that was Magma Grux. That was it. That was the only one that I actually felt like I really wanted to buy.
Mhm.
Like that one, because that skin was fucking sexy.
That was
so.
amazing, really well
That
made.
was
That's the
such a
kind of
sexy
skin that if I do spend, up to like £20 on, I expect a skin of that quality, right? With the particle effect changes and stuff, and all the cool badass effects on it. That's what I expect from it, not a simple remodel.
But then when you look at, because here's the question, right? Where, how much did you spend on League? And then whenever we start talking about League,
Oh, thousands.
thousands for me as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, I'm not going to answer that question because you guys will put me in a straight jacket and tell me I've got issues, you know?
I
Yeah.
mean, like, and there's so much shit that goes into that. It's like the effects and the abilities and shit like that. Like, just I don't know, man. It's so much. Though, one thing that's actually really cool about Faults was just the fact that you actually had the splash arts going into game. I thought that was a really nice touch because there's so many times in League where people just buy the shit for the splash art and things like that.
Yeah, and it is like, so this is one for completely separate point basically, but in terms of League, it's pretty disingenuous almost with the splash arts. People never look for the in-game model, they just see the splash art like, oh, that looks so good, and buy it, and it never looks quite as good in game. It can still look good, but it's not what you actually paid for per se, right? So even though you can say like Fault's actually more honest with their skins, because when you do look at them and browse them, you see the model, right? You don't see some fancy splash art out in front of your face. There is the argument that you're paying for that splash art too, right? And showing it, as you said, on the load screen. That's also a big element of it.
It's just another aspect. Look at Smite with all the crazy borders they've got in the loading screen. It's definitely a really good thing that Fault have done that, right?
But maybe there is argument that a splash art would be better than them showing off the model, right? Because it is better for business technically, but it is also nicer for some people to show off a splash art during a loading screen that they can see when they're buying the skin as well.
No, I just wanted to ask just because I was curious. But what were we actually originally talking about? We were talking about like the jailer skin and stuff like that.
Yeah, just monetization and the skins. And
Yeah, I mean, as far as Pred, do we know what their idea is for monetization and what proposed model they got going forward? Because you can assume that all of these games are going to have microtransactions. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm completely cool with that.
No, it's a free to play game.
Every game's going to be free to play. Yeah, you got to pay for your shit somehow, right?
Yeah. I think all of them should be aiming, especially for that free to play release, which Pred and OP already have. A way to I don't think you should give all the characters free. I think you need to give a baseline, right? Like when you do start off the game, you do give a base few characters, whether it's like 10, 15, whatever. and then you get the rest through in-game currency or purchasing, which I think is a good idea. And then it is mostly through skins, and you see Fault's already sort of dipping into that with the ward skins, for example, and going for the different kinds of cosmetics. I think that's a good way to do it, and I think Pred also should be looking into that in OP in future. How are you going to be generating that revenue in terms of skins and whatever cosmetics, load screen borders, announcers, there's loads of things you can dip into.
I mean, that's the thing. You can look at League. You can look at Pulsefire Ezreal is like the notorious one, right? Like the first legendary skin or whatever the fuck it was, right? Ridiculous price tag. Sure, it was on sale the first week, but you're spending like $20-$30 for a skin, right? And the argument is always people don't need to buy it if they don't want it. But the reality is that you need enough selection where people, if they want to engage with this, they can. There's enough cool shit out there where, you know what, I got $10 to throw at the game, like I'll happily do it because it feels worth my money, and that's the thing you really need to nail. And then having things like splash arts, like borders, high res, different character designs, different voice lines, all of these things come into play where you're like, yeah, this is really cool. This is my favorite character. I'm gonna, fuck yeah, I want to buy this. I don't care if it costs me an arm and a leg, right?
Yeah, completely agree.
No, the one thing though is that you can clearly tell where Pred's priorities are and where like Fault's are, right?
Yes.
Where it's like when you just look at the amount of content, where it's like just say what you want about Cyber Kwong and like all the skins that we mentioned, right? It's still more than what's come out for Pred, which it's like it's always hard to judge because it's like just allocation of resources, etc. I don't know, but where it's like I just want to give credit due to where credit's due, right? So, but it does look good. It just sucks because, like Felix said, like we are just competitive creatures.
Yes.
So, Pred sucks. Sorry, you heard it from me.
It's just it needs more. It needs so much more.
It has to show more. Like, yeah, because anybody, if you want to do the whole tribal warfare bullshit of like this game is better than this game is better than this game. Yeah, in the case of Predecessor, could it be better? Yeah, sure, man. Like it feels great. Animations are pretty good. The sound is pretty solid. Like all of these things could be improved, but it's going in the right direction, right? But simply put, there's 9 characters. The item shop is completely lacking. There's not even buffs on the map. Jungle interaction game. It's all. There just needs to be more.
But you do have to consider like how fast can they start implementing that stuff? Because as we said, like a lot of their baseline stuff is good, right? So it depends. Like if you can pump out a bunch of characters really quick this year, like and catch up to OP or get ahead, whatever. And same with your item system and get it revamped, and have your APD system and everything's balanced. Like not balanced, but as balanced as it can be around those by the end of the year, kind of thing. That could be really strong at that point.
Yep,
but it's whether it can get there and how fast it can. Is the question.
Like even things like champion passes, which I'm a complete advocate for, man. Like I'm in a cult when it comes to that shit, right? Like champion passives are the fact that Fault's got them is great, man. Like I don't care if they're right, wrong, whatever. The fact they've even put them in is amazing, right?
It makes the characters way more interesting, yeah.
Exactly, so much more interesting. Like different dynamics, more of a niche and more of an identity. Like all of these good things that come from it. And in the case of Pred, it's like if they just go with the base Paragon kits, effectively, like they're all pretty standard, pretty. Like they're just generic and they don't feel that interesting to play. There's not that many interactions and all these things. Can they change that up? How quickly can they do it? Do they even know they
have that issue that it looks too much like they want to remake Paragon, right? Which is I guess it's fine, but can you do that? Like, is it even worth doing? Like, don't you want to fix the issues Paragon have like right from the get go? So.
I mean, I think the big issues from Paragon is the item system and hero depth in terms of passives and the way their kits work, like, no passives and abilities, for example. I think once you solve those 2 major issues, recreating Paragon from that point is not bad at all, Like, there's a lot of good things in there. I think those are the 2 major systems you're looking at in terms of replayability and competitive play. And all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'll quote Riddick on this one, right? Because he put out a video recently comparing Predecessor to Fault and what his thoughts were and all that kind of thing. And obviously his view was, roughly, not verbatim, but it was that Predecessor is more trying to be a remake of Paragon, right? Whereas Fault's trying to be its own thing on some level, be the next step in the development. And it's definitely the right way to go about it. Because like you said, you've got years of experience from Paragon. You can compare yourself to all these other developers. Learn from those lessons, make it better. Like you've got the fucking keys to the car now, man. Like do whatever you want. If you believe something could have been improved upon, do it. That's great. Like,
yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's like you said, I think that's the major thing I'm liking Fault over something like a Pred right now. It is the depth through the aspects. It's a rune system per se, through the item system with the passives and actives, and through the hero passives and reworked kits. I think those are their best elements right now, even if they're not perfect. They're the most enjoyable
scuffed
part.
as it may be, but the ideas are there, right? And
exactly.
there's promise behind those ideas, and that to me is more important than does the game feel clean. Like that is super important. Don't get me wrong, but I've got more faith in that you're trying with different systems and you're trying to make the gameplay interesting and dynamic, as opposed to you can have the best feeling Paragon remake in the world, but if it's bland, it's bland, man. If there's nothing to the gameplay loop, why do I care? I'll play, like Import said earlier, I'll play a few games, I'll get to know the meta, I'll abuse the meta, I'll get bored of it, I'll move on.
Yeah, exactly. I'd rather have, like, you know, a dish of food that is really tasty and enjoyable rather than one that looks really nice, you know? That's how it goes. It's definitely about the depth within it. And Fault's definitely got that above the rest. So is there anything else you want to talk about Predecessor? The footage is just about finished for it.
No, I think we hit most of the points, right? Like I said, like what they're showing in terms of game feel and, you know, their engine or whatever it is, or whatever you want to call it, visuals, feedback, like it's all pretty good. You know, much better than Fault, arguably better than Overprime, but some places it's about even, give or take, in my mind, right? But I think it's a good step. It's where they go from here, and can they do it, and how fast can they do it?
Yeah, exactly, completely agree. Cool. So, just pedaling all the way back in our time spent playing over Paragon Remake, into Overprime, and the one that which we played the tournament of and probably played the most of. Where do we want to open up with that? Does anyone want to start with that?
Right, I want to touch on the whole like tribal warfare shit between the games, because this is something that irritates me to no end, right?
Yes.
No. Is that fuck you, right? Okay. But no, I understand that people have got their horse they want to back, right? And as far as the developers are concerned, these are your competitors. Of course, you want to do the best thing you can to make your game a success, because this is what you're passionate about. And you want to be able to do this for the next however many years of your life and give to the community the game that you would like to see, you know they would like to see as well, and all of that great stuff. But when it comes to Overprime specifically, this game has got such a bad rep are there reasons for it? Yes. But a lot of it is just not fair criticism, straight up. And we'll get into that and why that is. But to most people, all I want to say is that, like, cut the bullshit when it comes to this game's going to be the best and this game's going to be the best. And I don't care what you say about this, but that looks terrible for these reasons. As far as the wider community is concerned, you should be looking to play the best Paragon successor, remake, whatever's out there. That should be the horse you back, because for you've got no monetary incentive for this. You're not getting fucking paid, right? Just keep an open mind. And if you simp for a specific game, then the issue is going to fall through the crack. Like, they need to hear your feedback. Yes, it should be constructive, but if you refuse to hear any negative press about any game, whatever one it may be, or you want to attack another game, it's not helpful to anyone. And eventually... Indeed. In the case of Overprime, if I didn't say anything bad about it, which I've got a lot of things that are bad to say about it, trust me, if I didn't say anything bad about it, then how would they know to change it? Or how can I pressure them? How can I hold their feet to the fire? Like, and so when it comes to the petty criticisms that go across the board, like, learn from these games, see what they do well, see what this one does well. Fault did really good with the passives in that. Maybe we should implement that into our game, right? This is the outlook I think most people should be looking at it with, not just shitting on a game just because it's not the game they play and they favor the most.
100% agree. It definitely needs to be much more objective opinions on each game, and, you know, when you've tried it, you know, look at all the bright sides of it, not just hate on all the negatives of it because you don't want to see any bright side of it because you prefer the other one, right? It's as simple as that, and just look at it like that, and that's pretty much what we've come into the mindset of Fault with and such. There's a lot of elements we like about it, but we've said all the things we don't like about it for the reason that we'd like to see it improved, and we want the best Paragon remake, right? Whether that is Fault, Pred, Overprime, don't care. We've tried to help all of them by giving feedback, whether it's through documents, whether it's through direct feedback to devs, whatever. We're doing our best to learn how the games function, give the feedback towards them, and try and get the issues fixed with them, so that whichever one has got that progress and that push throughout, you know, the coming weeks, months, and maybe years, will be the one that, you know, strives ahead and will have something to play. You know, that's what we want, the best Paragon remake. No matter which one.
Would I want to play any of these 3 games in their current states moving forward? Fuck no. So even if I'm considered toxic as hell and people hate my opinions, like, I don't care, man. Like, I'm not going to play your game if it's not good.
Yes.
But I actually care about the IP, and, like, you know, we've all got history playing this game. We all love Paragon, the assets. But there's issues. Like, let's fix them while we can. That's the whole point of these remakes in the first place.
Yes.
Basically, contrary to popular belief, between all 5 of us, no one has a horse in this race. We just want to fucking play. And yes, comp matters a lot to us, but it's our opinion. So, cool.
I mean, I'll shill with it. If anyone wants to pay me, I'll shill for you. PM me. You know, and until that point, it's not happening.
And just something, by the way. Like, obviously, I feel like I'm kind of speaking for all of us, but I know especially mine, but, you know, everyone's DMs are open. If you have a question, man, like, bother us, please. we really just want the best game.
Yeah, all
And
5 of us
that's-
are always open if anyone wants to
Yeah,
chat
and like
about the
we're
Paragon
not
remakes.
experts, you know. We've all got different experiences and skill sets. We don't think our opinion is better than yours or anything like that. But it's like if you want our take on it as people that know life the shit out of these games, play at a high competitive level, and have played quite a few MOBAs over the last 5-10 years, whatever it may be, right? Like, just hit us up, man. I'll always give
Okay.
feedback. I'll be honest, but you might not like it, but I'll
It
do
had
it.
to be this meme, huh?
Don't include it.
Cool. Right. So swiftly moving on from any potential memes, we should probably talk about actual Overprime then.
Yep.
So we've obviously mentioned the tournament, how that was run. We've probably already covered everything about that, and there was a little bit of scuff in it, but it was
I
really
think-
enjoyable. Yeah.
Honestly, I think like just give people like a rundown of Overprime, man, because I feel like a lot of people either listening or who do listen to this, like they probably heard of what it is, but they think it's this dodgy game that you've got to fucking download from a torrent. And don't get me wrong, that is
Sure,
dodgy,
I'll
boys,
give a
right?
complete. Yeah.
But yeah, give like a fair rundown because I think
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah,
people just don't. It hasn't had the same exposure as Fulton predecessor.
yeah,
And
exactly.
it deserves
and-
more. And now part of that is on the fault of the devs. They
Exactly.
can do better, but you know, there's
Yes.
language barriers. There's you name it, but they're not bad guys, right? Like
Yeah. The devs are lovely people. There's no ill intentions there or anything. So I know there's a lot of people that used to play Paragon on, you know, console, whatever. I haven't played PC very long, and downloading from a Dropbox or whatever, or, you know, sort of a third-party site, whatever, it is very dodgy, right? You go onto their website, it's not the most perfectly well made. You click on the download button, you do go to this strange site, you know, you are downloading a zip file or whatever that you have to then extract yourself to actually play the game, right? A lot of people aren't used to this these days, and naturally so Steam and the consoles and everything. You don't have to do any of this, and professional devs shouldn't have any of this, realistically. The thing is, they didn't want to get it onto Steam yet. They don't want to show it off to the larger audience yet, because there is so many things they want to fix first and implement first. There is big issues with the game in that regard. So that's the main reason why they don't want to pump it out and make it super public yet. Also, their advertising is just pretty poor in terms of reaching out to a Western audience and everything in that regard. So that's why all that's there in a sense. But it is safe to download. You can pop it on, you can install it, you know, it just takes a little bit of effort, and once you do have it in, it is pretty good, you know, it does run fine. It has its own launcher, you start it up, it can patch for you, you start it up, go in, the servers now and everything, you've got the 2 maps to play from in terms of Legacy and Monolith. The game is balanced around Legacy, so Legacy is more well balanced rather than Monolith, and it runs pretty fine, as you can see just from the footage I got on screen in terms of what we got from the tournament on Legacy. This was sort of towards the end of the Legacy life before they ended up putting Monolith in. It plays really well. It feels really good. Like the abilities feel really good, the cancels feel really good, the gameplay feels really smooth, the feedback's really nice, sound effects is really good. Overall, it's just really enjoyable gameplay. Even if the balance isn't there, it is just pretty good, the game, and well made, and you should probably download it and form your own opinion on it. It will be on Steam at some point, they have confirmed that. It's just when they do it, I'm unsure of yet. It could be a month, it could be 2 months, it could be 3 months, who knows. It's till they got it in a place they want to put it on. But I'd give it the fair chance. If you haven't played it, you've played Fault, played Predecessor, whatever, and you want a good Paragon remake, just give Overprime a try, you know, hop on, play on a server, and if you don't like it, that's fair, you know, you might prefer a different remake, and that's completely fair. There are massive glaring issues of the game, but if what you like is there within the game, then feel free. It's going to be a new option for you. So yeah, that's pretty much Overprime in a nutshell right now.
Yeah, like you said, free to play, available 24/7. You know, like community's not super big, but there's enough people, right? And just have some fun with it and try it out for yourself.
Yeah, completely. Cool. And in terms of devs, just going off of that as well, so the devs to Overprime, they're super nice people, and they also work extremely fast in terms of what they do, right? Like in terms of implementing characters, they can do it very quickly. In terms of changing items and stuff, heck, they've even got the system where you can change the values of the item server side, right? So they don't even need to give you a patch to download when they're doing balance changes for items, right? Which is super nice as a player, not having to download these, you know, whatever megabyte patches. Like, in fact, Paragon, you know, had the big issue of Unreal where when they do a small balance change, you had to re-download a lot of stuff, right? Just to get the change in, whatever it was, the whole files, and it ended up being bigger patches for such small changes, especially hot fixes, and they've got systems like that in place, which is really nice, and they work really quick and they're really fast about that. But I think the actual devs themselves running it are actually super great people, and I think they do a really good job. They're really fast, right?
No, I mean, we can get into a bunch of the issues that we have with the game in a sec, but like for me, you know, compared to the other games and what we spoke about, the feedback in Overprime is pretty good, right? Like there's a few differences in terms of its hit scan autos, if your range as opposed to projectile,
That's the
you know, but abilities feel weighty for the most part, right? Feedback's pretty good. If you're dying, you don't feel like you're randomly dying most of the time. You know, movement is fine, you name it. Like there's a lot of good there. But at the same time, there are issues. But then, people say, well, talk about how it was at launch and the issues and the progress it's made.
Yes.
And that is true. Like, there's been a lot of issues. And even the balance in moving forward, which we'll get into, like, they've done things that I heavily disagree with and I think are really detrimental for the game. But also keep in mind, this is where the game is at right now. It's where Fault is at. It's where Predecessor's at. I'm not going to judge them on the merits of where they could be. In terms of in the past, if I look at Overprime, if anything, I know how much of a mess it was with things like peer-to-peer. Peer-to-peer was just, it's bad. Like, peer-to-peer in 2020 is a fucking meme, straight up, right? You should have servers. It's standard, bare minimum. But the reality is they've come a long way and they've done it pretty damn quick. I started playing the game back in May. I haven't really played the game much in the past couple of weeks since the tournament, but since then they've done so many different patches. They've released like Howie and Grim got fixed. They've released Grux. There's someone else they released as well. Steel got released as well, even though still sucks. But
Gadgets around the corner.
Yeah, gadgets coming out imminently. Servers got put up. Spectator got developed.
Analytics after the game when you finished in terms of damage dealt and
The
stuff.
analytics are actually nuts.
It's so good.
They're on a league level, if not even higher. It's crazy.
And it's like they've really pumped this stuff out. So when I look at it, I'm like, sure, does it have issues? But they've kind of demonstrated that they've got the ability to solve these issues and moving in the right way. The only place where I get pause is when it comes to balance and the gameplay loop. But at the same time, they've proved they're willing to listen and they're open to ideas and they've tried to make changes for the better. So it doesn't worry me as much as the other games because I've seen it,
Yeah, I completely agree. So yeah, in terms of the content's, sort of being produced ridiculously fast and everything, that's great. But we also haven't seen Fault and Pred, like how fast they can actually produce this stuff, because they haven't really, as far as we know, started implementing new characters, right? They haven't even attempted to start putting them in, right? Fault's probably on the way with it, but Predecessor, they said they're focused on other things right now. They're not focused on putting new characters in. So we don't actually know how fast they can put this content. If they can do it as fast, if not faster, then they
That's
can.
sick, right?
That's super sick. They output the content, they can catch up to OP, if not anything overtake, and that's really great. We're just yet to see that yet, essentially.
No, I'll always approach these from a skeptical point of view. As far as I'm concerned, I'm sure people are qualified, they've got their skills, but these are people who are doing it for a passion project. Until they show me that they can really put out a game that's worth my time, I'm always going to be critical and I'm always going to be a skeptic. But there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying I don't want them to succeed. I'd love to have a game I can play and fucking love and enjoy. Don't get me wrong, right? But I've got to see it. That's all.
Yeah, for sure. And then in terms of like things from Overprime to improve, right? In terms of feedback, where do we want to start with that? Because there's a lot of things to dig into.
I mean, can we address the coder thing real quick? Because
sure.
you know more about this than me. Yeah. So like what people are saying. I mean, again, you know more about it than me, man. So you talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, so Rocky Mania, like he's been working on Overthrow, for example, for absolute years before Paragon even died, essentially, and he was working on it for his portfolio and everything. As far as I know, he definitely did develop all the code himself and everything. He just worked on it for a very long time, and the guy is just a workaholic at that point. It's what he does, right? He doesn't go off and go and play game stuff. He makes game. That's him. It's just literally Rocky Mania, right? He makes game. That's him. And so he does just barrel on the programming, and I've seen firsthand, Ranger working on the map and stuff. They clearly know what they're doing, right? Like they're very interactive with the community. They show off a lot of the work they are doing and how fast they can do it. I'm not surprised that the game is in the state it is, seeing as it started so much earlier than the other projects, and they've had all that foundation, right? Because a big part of programming a game is setting all your foundation for, how do you want sort of item stats to be implemented, everything. Like how do you want every sort of piece of code to actually interact with the game? Once you've got all the baseline there, it's easy to add on to it, right? Introduce new content. So it's not a surprise they can do that, right? With Rocketmania setting that foundation really early in the game's development, essentially, before the others even started. So I'm not surprised it's at the state it is. And in terms of map similarities and everything, everything's very similar, but you can make the map very similar. Whether it's data mined or not, I don't know, but at the end of the day, they've got the map and it works. They can change it. They've shown they can change it. They show they can make Monolith in front of my eyes, for goodness sake, like that, and they can manipulate it. So I don't see why it's a big issue at the end of the day, if they did or not. And if they did, it's a problem, right? But we don't know, right? And we can't prove it. So I don't think they have, from what I've seen. So yeah. Do you guys have any takes on it?
You shouldn't assume they did.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the main thing.
The issue for me is it's the whole assuming guilt, right?
Yes.
Like innocent until proven guilty, guys, right?
Yeah.
You can go forward with that expectation, that's fine. You can remain cautious and heavily skeptic or whatever, but as far as we're concerned and what we've seen, doesn't that's not the impression we've got. Even if it was, like, once that happens, yeah, sure, man. Like, is that fucked up? I don't know. Like, it's not my field of expertise, you know. It is what it is. But we haven't seen proof of that.
Yeah, I mean, the reason we don't know is because there's no proof, right? Like,
Also,
I
Rocket
assume
stated
it isn't.
he didn't do it
Yeah.
in a post. So, like, why?
The devs have blatantly said they haven't. They've had the time to work on it, and reasonably so. So it's possible they can make it themselves. So why assume they didn't? You know, exactly that. I don't see why you'd have to assume it's David Land when you
I actually
have all these
don't know
options.
because I played Overthrow and I remember this rumor being very early already that he datamined code, and Overthrow didn't look at all like Monolith.
Like Monolith, yeah, or
No,
even
it really didn't.
Yeah,
It had
yeah.
the same
with the
assets,
gameplay,
like Vault, like predecessor, but it didn't look like Monolith. And while I agree that Legacy really does look like the old Legacy map, it's what they wanted. They said they want to recreate Legacy as close as possible. So,
But I mean, again, correct me if I'm wrong here, Blood, right? But like in terms of game feel and the way that Overprime is played, especially on the Legacy map, because Monolith is like a different beast in its own entirety. But if it was like 1-for-1, the game doesn't fucking feel 1-for-1. It's basically like a better form of Legacy. It's probably the best Legacy could ever have hoped to been at the time, right?
it is so much faster. It's actually quite enjoyable as soon as you get with these hurdle like the travel mode. Like, if you get over that and you get used to travel mode, it feels really fast and actually feels good as well.
So yeah, simple answer is we don't know. As far as we're concerned, who cares? We don't know. It didn't happen. Rocket Mania come out and said he didn't. I'm just a player, man. It's good enough for me. If he did do it, that's another lawsuit down the line that has nothing to do with me, man. So
yeah, exactly. And he's innocent until proven guilty.
less,
Like we've seen zero proof that this is the case. Like, you know, so it's not a worry, not a bother. So yeah, cool. Anything else to bring up, or shall we go into the?
Yeah, just go into the game itself. Yeah.
Cool. So personally for me, a lot of it was they had no initial design philosophy. Is the thing that really irked me about the game. They have no direction. It is literally just we make game to make everyone happy kind of thing. That was their sort of whole design. And because of that, you end up with, you know, these janky systems where you have health regen being too strong and general statistics being completely off and gold value being off and, you know, hero kits being completely wonky like steel. What's your guys' opinion sort of on all that and the item system and such?
They do feel impactful. However, the lack of how you say it, the lack of
direction.
Like that, not only direction, that you can build multiple different items. It feels like you figure out the meta and then you build this meta, no matter what kind of. And it's like, for example, the blink. Like, you just want the blink, and then the wizard books. The items that good, you can stack them. There's no unique passives, or like there is some, but not that many. So why not stack them? Because you can always sell them for full cost and that kind of stuff. Like, the item shop has its issues.
I mean, there's a whole bunch of issues, right? One-to-one resale costs, the fact that you're not. I mean, to be honest, it's pretty bare bones, yeah.
Limited
like,
points.
yes, the items are. Yes, they are. Oh my god. Yes, the items are impactful, right? Like, you have these active items, and you can really make like cool builds and all this. But in terms of like stats and a bunch of other stuff, like, it's just completely off. But sure, you can build blank and you can do these things and you can do cool stuff with Soul Sword. There are interesting items, but just not really a lot of depth.
Yeah, you don't have as many passives and actives as something like Vault, for example, where you do have, you know, this whole plethora of support items to build from, and in your P-Blade and everything for percent, you know, dealing with tanks and stuff. You do have those options, for which you don't have in Overprime, for example. You've got some, it's better than Pred, but it's not as much as Vault, for example. So yeah, it does lack depth in that regard.
Yes.
And again, limitations on the build through point caps, you know, and through limits of buying certain items, because, you know, they don't have unique passives or actives, but they just say you can only buy one kind of thing, right? Which I still dislike, you know. Like in League, you've always got the thing of Rengar where he might build like 2 Infinity Edges, for example, or Jhin, right? Because he wants the raw AD and crit, even though he's not stacking the crit bonus. It's just taking that option away from players.
While
you know?
unique passive should make a hurdle, you should not be locked out of it, basically.
Exactly, completely, yeah. And it is mostly about letting your players do what they want to do without having completely unbalanced interactions, right? That's sort of like the summary of it when it comes to itemization. And Overprime does that pretty poorly, in my opinion.
Yep.
I mean, other
Yeah.
than that, it's just there's just some stuff that is very janky, and also like some broken stuff. I always have to whine about Bellicas in these remakes because as soon as they get implemented, they're broken to me. In Fault, I think she will be broken as soon as they make their stun faster and they fix their drone. I don't know if it's their bug, like I don't know, but yeah,
It just doesn't
it's
appear
just
sometimes. Yeah,
the
visually.
mana she has is just completely broken. So I don't get why people rush to this hero out of all. There's a lot of more enjoyable heals.
Yeah, like
Um,
Howie or Gadget or whatever he is you to implement.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Also, the whole stuff with abilities through walls, it's just different than what people are used to.
Mhm.
I don't think. I mean, could be wrong, could be right. Just needs different balancing, and I don't think they've done that properly yet.
Yeah, I mean, you probably want to cater to certain abilities, right? Like Sparrow R&B, for
Yes.
example, should be a wall thing, whereas like TB R&B definitely shouldn't, right? It should function like
Exactly,
an auto attack.
exactly.
So,
And
yeah.
then, yeah,
I mean, another big issue while we're still on items is just the way that you have two separate powers, but it's just the fact that all abilities are energy power or whatever. It's like ability power and physical. Like there is no physical abilities. Is the only way that we can explain it, right? It's like every
Yes.
single ability is is magical damage. When you build ability damage, you are only building ability damage, and when you're building basic damage, you only modify your basic attacks. The same thing with like all this other stuff. So it does make it really janky sometimes, like the fact that you can do stuff like I did, like just go Mage Grim and then just sell your build late game because you clear waves so fast whenever you play mages, right? And you farm so fast when you play mages that all of a sudden you can just go AD at the very end. It's just it's a ridiculous concept. And there's a lot of things that, man, the frustrating thing about Overprime is that it has everything there, right? It has everything, but there's just like small things that just like they don't get changed. The fact that Fangtooth is still in its state just frustrates me. The fact that it's still just a shield, like it's stupid. It's stupid
Minion
that it's
waves,
been allowed to be this.
minion waves not scaling, right? And
No,
just
it's
being
like
one shot and
it's like they've done all the hard stuff. They even have all the heroes that you need. It's just like the item shop sucks and like the neutral objectives suck. The terrain still kind of sucks as well, but all three of them, in my opinion, like have problems with the terrains. It's not a big deal. But it's just like it's really really frustrating whenever you really believe that like OP could be something decent, and then it's just like you just have to deal with the same shit all the time. Like,
Yeah.
and it's just very easy to fix shit, but it's just adjusting a value for Fangtooth. Like I don't know.
Yeah, no, it is big issues with them that they've been told about as well. That they're not speedy and they're very sort of keen to put out new content and such without fixing what they've currently got as a base, right? Which is probably one of their bigger issues. And that's the same for OP, same for Fang2, same for items, whatever. And it's not to say they're not working on it, like they are. They've literally said they're planning on doing stuff with this. You know, they want to make characters have more depth. They want to have the Fangtooth one be more interesting. They want a different shop which functions more like a mobile traditional shop. They do like all these things, as you can see on screen. There's a bug with Blink as well, where you can go through the floor. That's extremely frustrating. But yeah, a lot of OP is frustration, right? Out of things that it could be, because things don't actually function how they should. Per se.
But like you say, the pieces are there. They're the most developed in terms of content out of all of them, in terms of volume, at least, I would argue. But then, again, they're lacking things like hero passives. That's something that I would like to see them change down the line, right? The whole rework to the item shop that needs to happen, and I fucking hope it happens.
Yes.
But this is all things that take time. These are new systems they have to put in place, whereas Fault, it's done the hard work when it comes to these systems. Right now, it's a case of tweaking them, and that's a lot easier to do. Pred, it doesn't have these systems, so are they capable of doing it? Do they have the right mind in terms of what direction they want to take the game and how they want their gameplay loop to go? Like, we haven't seen it yet, and until I see it, again, I don't know, right? And Overprime, everything's there, but their list of priorities are just so fucking backwards, man. And like you said about the Steam launch and things like this, and the direct download and all of this other stuff that looks really dodgy. And even when I downloaded it, I'm like, right, it's a direct download, it's peer-to-peer, like, what the fuck is going on here, man? I'm not touching this, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I completely understand the idea of, well, we want to polish it and put out enough content, then release it to the wider audience, and that's fine. But in terms of optics and marketing and community appearances and things like this, like, it's just not a good look. And then I'm like, well, are you guys just incompetent? Do you not understand how important these things are? Do you not understand you've got competitors in Fault, in Predecessor, or Furial, or, Core, RIP? Like, it's it doesn't make much sense in that respect. But then I look at the technical side of things, and I'm like, well, they're doing good work, but so what's the issue here? Where's the disconnect?
It's mostly just like, so like when you come to go into Asia stuff, they don't have like a Steam, right? They have like similar things and launchers and stuff, but they don't care as much, right? The Asian audience about such direct downloads and everything, and all this like jankiness to installing. Like a lot of them are used to that kind of thing, right? And that's just how they works over there, right? So the devs themselves don't really think it's a big issue, but then you get all the Western people that download off Steam every day, super ease of use. They're just like, what is this, bro? Like, we don't have to do this anymore. This is archaic. Like,
yeah, that's what it comes down to. Is it's the language barrier, it's the cultural differences. You've got an Eastern company that's got a Western audience, and maybe they're going to do things differently. But then you need to appreciate the fact that your audience is Western, and they're going to expect certain things. And they're going to question why you're not doing that. And even things like news posts that haven't been proofread and it's broken English from Google Translate or whatever it is, like it's just not a fucking good look, man. It's really not, and it really illegitimizes what you're doing, because for all intents and purposes, people should be hyped about Overprime, right? I see all of these people like, oh my god, Paragon's back, I get to play Fault now. I'm like, you could have played Overprime for the past couple of months, but the optics are so shit on it, and a lot of it is their own doing. You know, it's just mad. There's no need for it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's stuff they might eventually fix, but with all three of them, it is literally just like, you've got these big issues and kind of things that you're going to be fixing over time, and it's all about who's going to fix them first, right? And then where the player base is going to move to, right? At the end of the day, for someone like me, when I'm going to be playing one of these remakes, I'm still going to have a favorite that I'll probably play most of the time, but where the audience goes, you know, is going to be the one we inevitably have to start playing, right? Because it's going to be the only one that gets funded. It's going to be the only one that has monetization, because it's the only one going to have people paying for stuff, right? Because the casual player base does fuel your game.
I mean, yeah, like love or hate Fault, man. At least you hit Q and you get a game pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, exactly, and that's really nice, and it's really enjoyable, so that's the main reason why you'd want to play one of them, is just because you can actually play the game consistently over a larger player base. Even if the other one, you know, even if OP kept on developing for years alongside Fault, but Fault was huge, you know, people would still be playing Fault instead, right? If it gets the larger audience, unless there's some huge, big shift over, right, that Overprime does something amazing that draws a decent audience, which then can expand, right? But it's super rare, those kind of cases.
The longer you go, the more incentive you need to leave, right? Especially if you started incentive, you throw money into it and things like this, and you know, to tie it back to Fault and their release, like again, there were server issues and key issues, and none of their shit was their fault, right? And people shouldn't hold that against them. It's just unfortunate that it happened. Maybe could have prepared better, but whatever, right? But it is all about the optics of how people feel about your game and what they believe is going in the best direction. So when Overprime isn't doing things that they should just fucking do, just get it out the way. They finally got the servers up. It's not too little too late, but it took way longer than it should have, right?
For sure.
Steam release and having like a decent way to download it, even if it was just a more functioning client that didn't look dodgy as hell. Like, these are all things they could do overnight, effectively. Like, maybe it takes a week, whatever, right? But you could do this very quickly. You get a quick turnaround, and it would do so much for the health of your game in terms of player base, in terms of, you know, community outlook on what you're doing, perception. It's just mad to me, you know? Yeah. Yeah. And again, we've spoken to these devs a lot, right? Especially you, and you can bring these things up and they understand it, and we know they understand it, but at the same time, there is that disconnect of like, you understand it, but then what is the reason here, you know? And even if it's resources and priority, as far as I'm concerned, the playability of your game is a priority, right? The baseline is important. This is why with Fault, day one, you got all these game breaking bugs. Like, what the fuck are you doing, guys? To me, it looks inept, right?
Yes.
Even if it's not their fault or something happened or whatever it may be, people will react in this way.
Yes. Yeah, completely agree. Is there anything Overprime related we want to talk about before?
Fuck the auto attacks.
Thanks, Andre. Yeah, the ranged auto attacks are really awfully designed. Faults is a much better example, and Predecessor's a really good example of how auto attacks
actually horrendous.
So yeah, that is one big thing that needs to get fixed.
Like, why do you want a hit scan auto attack? It fires a projectile if you don't hit, but only if you have a wall behind you, in front of you. What?
It is kind of nuts, right? Especially the second part, right? If you don't hit, it still fires it, and you might hit. Like, it's kind of weird, yeah.
It's actually insane.
Yeah. And there's the issue of hitting things behind you as well, due to the way everything comes from camera, including auto attacks, but also Narbash Funk, which does happen in Fault as well. You do hit things behind you, but not to the same level, yeah.
I do feel like abilities or like mages feel very good in Overprime though. The thing that makes mid lane a meme in Overprime is the mana. because you have no mana mechanics whatsoever. You don't have like a mana lens, for example, Fold, or like I don't know. I'm sure
It's Wizard
Priestess
Book,
has
right?
some sort
That's
of mana
like
item. Yeah.
what you go
That
off
you
of.
like even river buffs, right? Priestess has river buff that
Yeah.
gives you mana. But you need these mana mechanics from mages that you get some mana back, and you can interact with the web after you clear the wave. And then in Overprime, it's like I cannot hit the enemy Gideon with my rock if I'm not hitting the wave also. It just doesn't make sense. I will run out of mana. He's gonna push me in, and I will get all that damage by just tanking minions and other stuff. Like it's
Yeah.
it's that, but I don't think they even see it, and that makes me. Yeah, it's frustrating that they don't see this kind of stuff.
That's the concerning thing, right? It's like the whole debacle we had of me complaining about their tank stats, and they nerf tank stats across the board, but they're using the same armor and magic resist system and formula as League of Legends, and I'm like, well, why is it a character base level 18 has more armor than a full build fucking tank in Overprime? The baseline is so skewed and it's incorrect, and the concern is, like I said with Fault, like I said with Pred, do they even see it? Are they even capable of seeing it? And I can give as much feedback as I want, but I don't have the creative control at the end of the day.
No, you're not going to make the game for her.
No, and that's what, and again, that's what worries you about all of these different games, right?
Yeah.
I mean, also too, the issue with Felix with the mana thing, like the base health is so high, level 1, so everything just feels like a wet noodle fight early on. So it's so obnoxious.
Yeah, time to kill would be too high.
Or they will get away with travel mode, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, somebody was asking about travel mode as well. I think we all across the board hate travel mode, right? It's got too many issues. It's not fundamentally garbage, but
it worked.
The
on
gameplay
the worked on, but couldn't be there in the final product. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously, as far as the legacy map is concerned, the map was developed around travel mode in mind,
Exactly.
in terms of roam timings and everything else. So it's kind of, they're tied together in that sense, and that's why with Overprime now, if you go and play on the servers, you will play a map of Monolith, right? Basically copy paste in many ways, like it looks different, whatever, but the terrain and the layouts and the gank routes, they're all basically the same. There's river buffs, orb, fangtooth, you know, but realistically you have to move away from that map just because travel mode, it wasn't good. But now they've got the issue where they imported all of these things that were balanced around legacy and developed with legacy in mind on some level, and now you're just throwing it all into Monolith and it plays with a lot of issues. But having said that, like Pred, they're aware, they're going to change it. We'll see what they do. I'll give them props if they do it. If they don't, I'll shit on it just as much, you know?
Yeah. Anything else about Overprime import?
It's a damn shame. No, it is.
It really has this bittersweet taste. Right?
It does.
Like what could have been, because we did play a lot, and I would say we enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Not always. But
I mean, we tried, man.
yeah, we tried to enjoy it.
No, I mean, just we tried to really say as much as we could and do as much as we could, and it's just in where it is. Could have come back, sure, but it's just a shame.
Yeah, could be much further along at this point if they had the right priorities and such. But yeah, cool. Well, I guess I'll conclude everything then. So at the end of the day, guys, there's 3 Paragon remakes for you there. Fault, Pred, Overprime. We've talked about all of them in a decent amount of detail here. Their issues, their positives and stuff. They've all done pretty well since their releases. Of course, Overprime being out the longest. It all depends over the next months who's going to be outputting the most content or fixing these core issues that we've sort of gone over, and see how they do. Whether anyone else jumps in the race as well, we don't know. At the end of the day, I'm glad there's lots of options available, and there's lots of dev teams working, because it's more chance that one of them will eventually succeed, especially because they'll be pushing each other through competition, and that's always good. So I hope we get a good Paragon remake at the end of it all. But otherwise, I hope you've all enjoyed our podcast. I hope you can all reach out to us at some point if you ever need any help or have any questions about any of the Paragon remakes. We're all there available on Discord. Anyone that's going to be watching on YouTube, which I will be uploading to, I hope you've enjoyed as well. And any last notes from any of you guys before I close it out?
I just want to say what Ray already said, that we don't want to bash these projects. Like, we just have to give criticism, because what else? Like, we're gonna say it's good. It's not gonna. I mean, obviously then it would be good, but yeah, it's not gonna help anyone, right?
Yeah, like I said, give credit where credit's due, but I've seen way too many fucking games die where people bury their head in the sand, ignore the issues. Like, everyone's got their own take on Paragon or whatever MOBA they play or whatever game they play, but you know when something doesn't feel great, and it's better to vocalize that and be honest about it. And it's not to say just shit on them and tear them down, That's not the point. But if they don't even know what they're doing wrong from your point of view, then how can they ever fix it, right? As talented as these people may be, they can't see every angle, and this is why as soon as they release into early access, into closed alpha testing and all these kind of things, you expose it to so many different people, and then suddenly they're finding things you didn't even realize, right? They're breaking your game in ways you couldn't have even conceived, and that's why giving feedback is important. But just be fucking honest about it. And if somebody's being critical, don't shit on them. And likewise, if somebody's giving credit, fair play, man. It's a good thing. Let's push that further.
Yeah, that's why I do the big documents I do for them, to try and help them improve, because that's my feedback, that's my critique on it, and I hope it's useful. That's essentially it. Cool. Anyone else? We all good?
I think people are sick of my voice, man.
Cool. I hope you've all
Hope
you've all enjoyed the Ray podcast. We will be heading off now. I hope you guys again have enjoyed. I hope you will have a lovely rest of your evening or night wherever you are in the world. And we might be doing more Cub podcasts in future, depending on what occurs. Especially if you guys have enjoyed.
Starring guests, Spotify deals, it's all coming, boys.
Yeah. But otherwise, I'll probably be streaming some other time later this week. So I'll catch you guys then. Thank you all for the support as always. And yeah, have a good one, guys.
Peace out.
I keep dreaming of better days with you. With you, with you, with you, with you, with you. With you, with you, with you, with you, with you. We've been hurting a while, someone figure us out, but we thought it could. I've been missing your smile, it don't come often now. Say you're sad and I am too, yeah. Late nights in the driveway, I think about what my friends say, how I'm too good to be with you, but losing you will make me blue. You're stuck in the paper town, not sure if you make it out, but I keep waiting for you to. Guess I'm dreaming of better days with you. Nothing is like a stay between us two. I wish I could stay away from you, but I keep dreaming of better days with you. With you, with you, with you, with you, with you. With you, with you, with you, with you, with you. With you, with you.
You're listening to Chill Your Mind Radio.